Kenya when I was about 5 or 6 years old.
Okay.
And we were in this wildlife park in a grey Morris Minor. This rhino started chasing us. There's me and my sister in the back seat.
Right.
It was like something out of Jurassic Park.
Yeah.
We were turning around saying, "Believe it, Dad. Just put your foot down, Dad. We're in a field. Put your foot down." This rhino was chasing us.
One from Mark here in Derby. Went on holiday for our first romantic holiday to Tunisia years ago. Decided to take my girl into a petting zoo. I got a bag of food to feed the animals. A giant goat then went for me, putting its front legs over my shoulders and proceeding to headbutt me over a fence into one of the pens, covering me in the food and making my nose bleed. I got out of the pen, then the goat and all his mates attacked me again, sending me running and screaming like a girl out of the zoo, with my girlfriend rolling with laughter on the floor.
A tarantula climbed up the bottom of the bed on the sheet.
Yeah.
And it walked all the way up. It's eyeball to eyeball.
Wow.
And I thought to myself, what am I going to do when it climbs over my face? But then a miracle happened. It raised its two front legs and waved them around. And then it turned around and walked down the side of the sheet.
Boris Johnson had been attacked by an ostrich. The former PM was enjoying a safari trip with his family when the bird leaned into his car and went oi oi and pecked his hand. In footage shared online, he quickly jerked from the ostrich. Don't dirty minds away from the ostrich, and shouted, "Oh, Christ, get hell," before driving off. And so I just set it out there. Have you been attacked by an animal? When I was about 7, says Trevor Jenkins, on holiday in Spain in the 70s, a monkey pulled my long hair. It was long because it was the 70s. I was in floods of tears. And as the family car drove out the car park, an elephant ripped off the car mirror. We got the message. Spanish animals aren't to be trusted. Jeremy, Brittany here from the United States. I was spurred by a rooster in my right foot a few years ago. Spurred? How do you get spurred by a rooster?
One here from Dan in Hampshire. Morning, Mike. As an Aussie that has been dive-bombed by our version of the Magpie, which is much bigger, every springtime.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Good morning and welcome to May Day. It is Morning Glory. It is, of course, a beautiful Thursday morning, the 1st of May. Normally speaking, you would be thinking, well, this is a day to celebrate the workers of the world, isn't it? This is a day to celebrate revolution. This is a day to celebrate all manner of things to do with trade unions. The trade unions this morning are on the front pages because they're not very happy with the Labour government, it seems. Now unions reject Ed's green lunacy, it says on the front page of the Daily Mail. Basically, Unite, who've obviously been listening to this show just as much as Sir Tony Blair was yesterday, have said that the net zero plan for Labour will become a millstone around everybody's neck. And also now Number 10, who are clearly very upset about what Tony Blair said yesterday, are refusing to guarantee Ed Miliband will keep his job. And that's the first bit of good news we've had, and it's only the 1st of May. Tom Slater's here with us from Spiked Online. He's going to be taking us through some of the big stories of the day. It's also Election Day, of course, which is slightly curious for us in the broadcasting world because we're not really allowed to talk about it. We can talk about it until 7 o'clock when the polls open, but at 7 o'clock, that's it. It's sort of complete and utter purdah. We have to pretend it's not happening, and then we'll be able to report on it once the polls close after 10 o'clock tonight. So we'll be bringing you all of the news that's in the papers, including that the number of small boat crossings has now reached 34,000 since the Labour government took office in July of last year. We're going to give you the migrant of the day, as we always do. We're going to be talking about Rachel Reeves, who got herself into more hot water. Apparently the sleaze watchdog is probing yet more freebies that she's been taking and not declaring properly. We're going to be talking as well about how dangerous the crime situation is in London. Jensen Button's wife has apparently come out and said that she's never going to come back to Britain. It's too dangerous after having a suitcase stolen with 250 grand worth of stuff in it just outside St Pancras Station in London. It is, as I say, going to be the hottest day of the year, no doubt. So if you are actually doing anything, going to work, etc., you might find yourself being a little sweaty. We shall let you know. Also, of course, we're going to be giving you the latest on the Metropolitan Police officer who's now facing a serious misconduct charge, even though he was cleared of the murder of Chris Cabba earlier on in the year. Also, we'll be talking about more cyber attacks hitting the shops as well. Lots to talk about, much to do. You can reach us, of course, on 0344 499 1000. This is Morning Glory. Let's get it on. So here we are. Welcome to Morning Glory, and of course the greatest breakfast show that anybody's ever seen, ever in the world, in the history of everything. Tom Slater's here. Very good morning to you, Tom.
Morning.
Lovely day out there. I mean, it was the hottest day apparently of the year yesterday, but they reckon today might be even hotter.
No, absolutely. It looks gorgeous already, and maybe it'll be a interesting day for politics.
I think it will be, yeah. I think there's an awful lot of interest in the results, particularly of the by-election in Runcorn, and obviously of the way that the council elections are going to go. Lots of people as well not able to vote because of this weird kind of, you know, what I call the sort of gerrymandering of the various different places that aren't now actually going to be open for business because they're changing the way that they're run. And a lot of people are not happy about that.
No, especially because of how late in the day it came, and you know, it's always going to raise questions about is this being fiddled to electoral advantage, you know, rather than it just being something that was part of the process of restructuring local government. But nevertheless, it's going to be an incredible test, not just for how far Reform have come, but also how far Labour have fallen, really. And the Conservatives, of course, who were defending their kind of high watermark of local election seats back when Boris Johnson was in his pomp. So it's really going to be like a kind of yardstick of how all of that.
Absolutely right. And as I say, we can talk about what's in the papers about it right up until about 7 o'clock, but then the polls open, and then we can't. So we don't want to hear from anybody on that because we won't be able to read any of your messages out. So we'll be having a sort of politics-free day after 7, more or less, but not entirely, because there's an awful lot in general that we could talk about, which is all to do with net zero, because after Tony Blair sort of hurled a great big rock into the middle of the pond yesterday, and then started to try and row back on it, because he's obviously got a very angry call from somebody inside Downing Street. We've got the Times saying solar panels on all new homes in a net zero push, which seems to me to be a direct, instruction from Downing Street. Here's a story for you, and the Times have put it on the front page. The unions having a go at Ed Miliband on the front page of the Mail. And then in the Telegraph, don't give up on oil, says Norway.
It's really interesting, this, because it just feels like Tony Blair's intervention, as unfortunately is the case, can set the political agenda, but in this way, in quite an interesting fashion, because there's been this sort of force field around net zero. All of the parties agreed on it completely up until about 5 minutes ago. You've got a Labour Party which has really hitched its wagon to it, and yet it just took Tony Blair to say some relatively commonsensical things, like the public aren't going to put up with their living standards being
and it's doomed
trashed.
to failure the way it's being done, which is right.
Exactly, and also that the developing world won't put up with it. They're not going to say, well, you develop with fossil fuels, why can't we? So not for the first time, Tony Blair's got Keir Starmer in hot water by saying something vaguely sensible. And we're still seeing the ripple effects of that. And I think that story with Norway is really fascinating. Their energy minister coming out talking to the Telegraph, saying that basically saying why are Labour abandoning the North Sea and oil and gas, and in the article pointing out that Norway have amassed this huge sovereign wealth fund because of oil and gas. This is something that they're really invested in, and yet we are in the process of banning any exploration in our own fields. It's insane.
It is insane.
That's what they're.
And funnily enough, Alex Salmond, God rest his soul, used to talk about Norway an awful lot when he was still a political force in Scotland before he passed away, because he couldn't quite understand why Labour's policy, or the Tories' policy as well, in the North Sea was kind of not anywhere near as good. Because it's not difficult, is it? If you're a country which has got a great deal of wealth underneath the sea or underneath the land, why would you not plunder it? Why wouldn't you just take advantage of it?
Especially at a time when, China is still opening coal-fired power stations at a rate of knots. It's so obvious that by not exploiting the natural resources we've got, whether that's in the North Sea, whether that's on land in terms of the fracking reserves that could be tapped into, you're just onto a loser. You're impoverishing yourself for no possible gain whatsoever.
You're deliberately sort of hobbling yourself. It's like you're tying your two legs together and trying to move forward without actually being able to walk. I mean, interestingly enough, in the Norway story, it also refers to that power cut in Spain and Portugal, because it turns out that the Spanish government there, who are very keen on net zero, are sort of trying to keep it all secret, trying to cover up information about the cause of the power cut by prioritising green ideology in their energy policy. They don't really. It was very funny, that story, how at the beginning it suddenly was caused by some kind of weird, unusual weather event, they said. Then they realised nobody was going to buy that because it was like 22 degrees in Portugal, it's not exactly very hot. And so then everyone said, oh, we don't really know what happened, so it's wrong to speculate. And they wouldn't have it that it might partly be due to the fact that net zero grids are not as resilient as regular kind of fossil fuel based grids, and so it's a big wake-up call, I think, to the rest of Europe that this kind of thing can happen, and it's not going to be very good for the economy.
No, absolutely, and I think the longer the silence goes on, the more people are going to speculate, are going to suspect that maybe this supposedly implausible suggestion that net zero might have had something to do with this might well be part of the picture. At the very least, even if it wasn't the cause of that outage, it's clearly going to make it more difficult to respond to it because of the way renewables work, because of the fact that as soon as they drop out, there's no kind of... it's one of those things where it drops out very suddenly. You don't have the kind of latest...
and bring it back on.
Exactly. It's at very least part of the picture, and the caginess around it, I think, is really telling.
Yeah, people who know about these things talk about inertia, that it's very much less responsive. It's not as sort of agile. It's not as easy to start up again once it's gone down. All of those things are true, it seems to me, and so clearly that is what they suffered from. And when people say, oh, but they got it all back within 24 hours, well, 24 hours is a long time to have no power in a city like Barcelona or Madrid. It's like having no power in London. It would be madness, wouldn't it?
No, completely. And, it's one of those things where the speed with which people try to basically shush and shame anyone who suggested that energy policy, green energy policy, might have had anything to do with it, tells you how the environmentalists, I think, are on the defensive now.
Yes.
And not before time, because this agenda that all the parties have been pursuing has been ruinous. And sometimes it takes, unfortunately, someone like Tony Blair to point that out, but we're having a much more healthy debate about this even now, I think.
Even now, because one of the things that's come out of it, as I say, is the Mail's version of the story, which is Unite having a go at the government's laughable inaction to protect jobs, is what they're saying. Because, again, we keep hearing, when you had the Energy Security Summit last week, Keir Starmer talking about creating hundreds of thousands of jobs, I think 600,000 jobs, he said. And you're kind of going... well, where are they coming from then? I mean, 600,000 jobs is a lot of jobs. And so far, what we do know is that GB Energy hasn't created any jobs. I mean, if anything, they've only got one guy working there. I think they've now hired somebody else. I mean, we actually went on their website, which they've now set up after all these months, and they've got a situations vacant section, and there's no situations vacant. They're not actually offering any jobs, so they don't have any jobs to give out. So where these 600,000 jobs are coming from, is anybody's guess.
And it's always been a myth, isn't it, this idea that you're going to take all of these jobs formerly from industry, formerly from fossil fuel production, and that we're just going to replace them with these shiny green jobs. Even the environmentalists have to admit that that's a lot fewer jobs if that ever materialises, but also if you can't get these projects off the ground, they're never going to come along. And the interventions from Unite, I think, are really interesting, and we've seen this growing tension between the unions and Labour on these policies, because the unions are saying pretty understandably this could be like another kind of closing of the coal mine situation, and it's being done for the sake of pure ideology. So that's something that's going to be a much bigger tension between the kind of trade union labourism and kind of Ed Milibandism and who's going to win out.
But when you hear the Greens talking, and I'm not talking about just the Green people in the Labour Party, but the Green Party themselves. I was listening to Carla Denyer was on some show last night talking about the benefits of the green transition, and it's all pie in the sky. It's all nonsense. They talk about there's going to be all these jobs, there's going to be all this money, energy's going to be cheaper. Well, there's no evidence for any of those things, and the only thing we know is that energy prices just keep going up. And despite what Ed Miliband may say, it's not just because the price of gas is fixed somewhere internationally.
No, absolutely. I mean, it's all just nonsense. It's the idea that hopefully if you kind of plough enough investment into all of this and enough government focus, that it will produce those things in the end. But you just think there's a reason why no country around the world has developed using renewable energy, that has become a first world country using renewable energy. There's a reason that we've got the highest energy prices, particularly industrial energy prices, essentially in the developed world now. And it's because we've gone down this route of renewables, which lack the two fundamental things you need in energy, which is they should be cheap and reliable. They are neither of those things. It doesn't matter how much money you throw at it. You can't push water uphill. It just doesn't work.
And it doesn't matter how much you say it's going to be cheaper. If it isn't, and that's what Ed Miliband is getting caught out at. And interestingly, he's looking now like he's maybe got a much more precarious position than he had even 2 days ago, because Number 10 yesterday refused to guarantee that he would have a job sort of towards the end of this year.
No, that's a really telling, and that's something that's kind of been brewing for a while. You remember the tensions between Ed Miliband and Rachel Reeves over Heathrow expansion. It's kind of clear that whilst Keir Starmer was very close politically to Ed Miliband, more so than he would have been traditionally someone like Rachel Reeves, that he is at least recognises a tiny bit that you've got to be more on the side of growth than greenism,
right.
and maybe that's something that will come to a head
in the current situation where the economy is going faster down the gurgler than you can say at any time probably in the past few years. They need something. They can't, and they can't just keep piling, more misery on more misery, and then say, well, the answer is this green growth that's going to save us. Well, it isn't, is it?
No, and it's not produced that anywhere. Show me an example in which these policies have given you anything other than ruin in another
because
country.
Everything is subsidised. I mean, like the story in the Times: solar panels on all new homes in net zero push. Ministers are to announce that new homes in England will be fitted with solar panels as standard within 2 years. Well, one, I don't really believe it, because if they can do that, why are they not doing it now? Because at the moment we've been told that the solar panels that we're going to import can't be from China if they've been made with slave labour, which pretty much covers all solar panels from China. So now they're going to find somebody else that's making solar panels. I don't think anybody else is.
No, exactly. It's one of those things.
So where are they all coming from?
No, exactly. Especially because of the fact that as you say, the components, the kind of the minerals and so on, the rare earths that you need to produce a lot of this green technology. We know that it's dominated by China. We've had this recent decision very late in the day that Labour don't want to risk using any of those products that might be the produce of slave labour. So there's just more and more questions. And the solar panels thing, if people want to opt to have that, that's absolutely fine. But the idea that you've got to mandate it from central government, again, it just suggests if you have to force people, companies, developers, whatever, to do this stuff, maybe it's not that good of an idea in the first place.
If people are not buying it because it's too expensive, one, or because it's not, as you say, as reliable as other forms of heating or other forms of powering your house, they're just not going to go for it. And again, they also come out with this nonsense, and Dale Vince is guilty of this, the ecotricity boss, where he says things like, once you put this, hardware in, software in, you don't have to worry about it. Well, you do, because it actually, has a shelf life. Wind turbines don't turn forever. They have to be replaced with new wind turbines, and the same goes for solar panels. They don't last forever.
No, absolutely, and also they don't work all of the time. This is the thing about that. It's always worth hammering home in relation to solar, in relation to wind. When the sun doesn't shine and the wind doesn't blow, you don't have electricity, and this is the core fundamental problem that they've never really been able to own up.
And here's the kicker, right? The change in policy is estimated to add about £3,300 to the cost of building a semi-detached or terraced house, and just under £4,000 to a detached property. So it's already going to be more expensive. Then it says it's forecast that homeowners will recoup the extra costs within 4 years through savings on energy bills. Pull the other one, it's got bells on it. I mean, really, they really think we're that stupid?
And also, these are the numbers that have been, briefed to a newspaper from government. We've seen so many times the claims unravel, heat pumps are going to be the greatest thing since sliced bread, and when people really start looking into it, they see they don't work very well and they're exorbitantly expensive. So there's always so much overclaiming going on, and people have gained the right, I think, to be very sceptical whenever a politician says, here's this win-win situation, it's green and it will save you money. Very rarely has that been the case.
Ministers who set a target of building 1.5 million new homes by the end of the Parliament said the change was vital to meet their target of decarbonising the electricity grid by 2030. You know what I see happening here? I think we've got now two factions inside of Downing Street, and you've got one lot leaking these kinds of stories to the Times, and the other lot leaking the Unite type stories to the Mail. So you've actually got a real conflict going on behind the scenes, where you've got the net zero zealots who are all coalescing behind Miliband, saying, let's do this, let's put solar panels out there and say we're going to put them in all houses that are new. And then meanwhile you've got the other lot going, we're not having it. This is kind of civil war inside the Labour Party. No, Telegraph's got a good piece on it, actually.
It's certainly got the elements of that, and whilst at the moment it's the sort of more pro-growth faction, they're still pretty environmentalist, they're still pretty paid up to this idea. They've just got this kind of cakeist approach. We're like, oh, you can have the best of both worlds, and there's no reason why we can't expand.
Cakeist, I've never heard that.
It was the sort of thing they used to accuse Boris Johnson over with Brexit. There's a bit of that on the more kind of right section of the Labour Party, but nevertheless it's one of those things where I think the unions and the voters are going to put continuous part of the pressure on them, because the fact that the whole net zero agenda will be, the brunt of it will be borne by working class people, and that is a deal that no one is willing to sign up to.
It certainly won't be borne by the MPs who get all their heating paid for by the taxpayer. The other story that I find interesting off to the side of this is this thing, it's in the Mail today, because I've myself been contacted by the utility companies saying you must change your smart meter, or you must change your meter over. 300,000 people could lose heating in meter switch off, it says here. More than 300,000 homes are at risk of losing their hot water and heating when the electricity meters are switched off on July the 1st. This is some new, and I suspect again net zero is behind all this, but all the electricity companies are saying, if you've got an old style meter, you have to get a new one by, and they started sending me all these warnings, you know, like, boy, warning, you know, you might not be able to get any electricity after July the 1st unless you fix this situation up, which I've now done. But they're now saying they haven't got enough people to make it happen for every household in the country. So 300,000 people might be without power. Which is insane.
It's a complete mess, especially because of the fact that this deadline when they were going to turn the old RTS system off, whatever it's called, it's been, everyone's known about it for a long time. But it's a reminder that just because despite having plenty of run-up, the ability for both companies and government to just let these things slide by and then become a catastrophe at the last minute is incredible.
I know. But then they're saying, you know, I mean, it's effectively impositioning of smart meters on everybody, which a lot of people don't want. I mean, I don't particularly want one, but they're more or less putting you in a headlock and going, well, if you don't have it, you might not have any electricity. So you've got to get it done. It's
been very useful for them, because obviously they've been trying to strong-arm people into getting smart meters for the longest time anyway, and this switch over has just made them say, well, there you go then. This is your only option.
It's like compulsory smart metering, you know, so you're going to have one, whether you like it or not. I find it very weird, very strange. Anyway, we'll talk about that, plus more coming up. It's 21 minutes past 6. Here's one from Luce, who says, morning, Mike. In Manchester here, there's no local elections for us. One of my pet peeves is people who complain about politicians or the state of this country, then don't vote. It might seem a waste of time to some, but people died to allow us to live in a democracy. Get over yourselves. Have a great show. Enjoy a few hours of local politics free coverage. Well, we will. Absolutely right. 7 o'clock is when the polls open, and we won't be talking about them at all, because that's the rules, unfortunately. This is Morning Glory. I'm Mike Graham. Back after this.
To bow down to dangerous DEI policies. I am concerned, and I will say the vast majority of the people in the Corps and the Armed Forces, and probably in all sectors of public life in the United Kingdom, are concerned that this political push will lead to underqualified people being pushed into high up positions where they could cause injuries and deaths. And that's what this whole situation is about.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Welcome back to Morning Glory, 24 minutes past 6. I'm Mike Graham. Sean from Bridlington says, Mike, I've had quite a few solar panels, even by the company's own figures. It would take 18 years to pay for them in energy savings. Well, that's quite a long time, isn't it? 18 years. This is the problem. You know, you see them occasionally when I go down to Sussex at the weekend, because there's a lot of, obviously, sunshine down there on the coast. You see a lot of houses that are facing south that have got solar panels on the roof. And I'm sure for those sorts of people it might work very well. But unless you've got quite a big roof area, if you live in a flat or something like that, I don't know how that's supposed to work, really.
No, absolutely. It's just not really going to benefit you at all. And all you're going to see is, in the short term, just those added costs lumbered onto, you know, the price of the property or the price of your rent, ultimately, or whatever it might be.
And presumably they must need some kind of maintenance as well. You must have to check them every now and again, or do something to them to make sure they're not, you know, malfunctioning in some way, shape or form.
And they'll need to be replaced from time to time, as you were suggesting earlier.
Yeah.
So, yeah, it's always kind of sold as like this kind of miracle fix for everything, and it's always the devil's in the details.
It just doesn't seem to be right. Let's go and have a look at what happened to Prime Minister's questions yesterday. This was, of course, only the second one, I think, since the Easter recess. And Kemi Badenoch decided she would quiz Keir Starmer over the national inquiry into grooming gangs.
It's now 4 months since I asked him for a full national inquiry. Instead, he promised 5 local inquiries. There will be one in Oldham. Will he now name where the other 4 inquiries will be?
Why did they not implement a single recommendation in the 14 years they had in office? We're taking forward those. There are recommendations already in place about the change that needs to be taken. They sat on a shelf under the last government. We are acting on them. We are providing for local inquiries, and we're investing more in delivering truth than they ever did.
He cannot name a single place because nothing is happening.
Yeah, well, you'd have to say Keir Starmer's been dragged kicking and screaming into this, hasn't he? And he's still not really doing anything. And it's all very well for him to say, why wasn't anything done under the Tory government? You know, he said he would do stuff, and he's apparently not doing anything.
No, absolutely. This has been absolutely shocking, especially because of the fact that when he announced these 5 local inquiries, that was already quite bitter medicine for a lot of these victims groups, because they wanted this national inquiry. Then within the space of a couple of months, it's gone from 5 localised inquiries to 1, and then a few other little measures here or there. And it just it reinforces this sense that he doesn't take this issue particularly seriously, wants it to go away, wants to ignore it, and doesn't care.
It's worse than that. I think he really doesn't want to do it. I think, you know, because of his previous kind of what you might call, I don't know, aligning with some Muslim communities. And we see so many of his videos that he puts out how grateful he is to the Muslim community for this and how wonderful the Muslim community is for that. He doesn't want to look at this story because it doesn't fit the narrative for him.
And this is one of those things that I really struggle to understand as well. The idea that you're going to somehow put off or alienate British Muslim communities or Pakistani Muslim communities in particular by going after paedophiles. It's an insult to everyone involved.
It really is.
To think like that.
It makes no sense at all. Kemi had another go at it. Let's have a look.
Andy Burnham wants a national inquiry. He's not Conservative, he's Labour. Harriet Harman wants one. The member for Rotherham wants one. All of the victims I have met want a full national inquiry. He keeps talking about local inquiries, yet they have not got going. And they haven't got going because local authorities don't want to investigate themselves. Local inquiries cannot force witnesses to appear. Local inquiries can't force people to give evidence under oath. So why won't he have a national inquiry?
Mr. Speaker, we've had a national inquiry. We've had recommendations. There are hundreds of recommendations that have been made in relation to this issue. It is a serious issue. I strongly believe that we should implement the recommendations that have already been made. And that is what we are doing.
Yes, I strongly recommend. I mean, he just doesn't get it, does he? He doesn't realise that people... There was a programme on... We're getting Maggie Oliver's coming on the show later on. There was a documentary last night on Channel 4, which we'll have a few clips from later on in the show, about, you know, just the awfulness of all of this, you know, talking to victims, you know, putting together more dossiers about these ghastly individuals that carry out this kind of awful behaviour. And he just would rather it all went away.
Yeah. And this has been the story of this scandal, hasn't it? Because it's not as if it hasn't been covered. You know, the Times newspapers writing about this back in 2011. You have had this new Channel 4 documentary. There was also the Channel 4 drama that was made a few years ago, which, unlike Adolescence, wasn't screened in every school, funnily enough. The problem is the politicians have never responded. It's not that the media haven't covered it. It's that the politicians have backed away from it for all of the reasons that we know, because they're terrified of touching it. And for Labour in particular, now that they're back in power, it's because of the fact that many of these places in which this happened, these are Labour-run areas, Labour councils, Labour officials, potentially implicated, at least being accused of looking the other way. So it just to be so clearly political about something which is such a moral horror, it's just they can't. This cannot be the response going forward.
No.
They can't.
They're going to have to change tack, aren't they? On so many things, really. I was watching with incredulity the face of Rachel Reeves, which looks like thunder every time she's ever sitting behind Keir Starmer. She's in the papers again today. Rachel Reeves left embarrassed last night after the Westminster Sleaze watchdog opened a probe into one of her ticket freebies. She can't seem to get away from the freebie ticket story, can she? I mean, it's not even that serious, this. I mean, I say that even as somebody who would always pounce on anything that would be in any way critical of Rachel Reeves. But this is her trip to the National Theatre, which cost 276 quid, which she said had something to do with work, even though she seemed to take members of her family. And there's been some problem in the way that it was reported or, categorised in the Register of Interest. But it's just embarrassing, isn't it? Why can't she seem to get away from getting these free tickets and getting in trouble for it?
Yeah, no, absolutely. And it's also, it seems, first of all, just a bit of a sort of schoolgirl error, the way in which this wasn't reported in a timely enough fashion.
Yeah.
But also, I don't know where she's got all this free time. This is kind of a tremendous element of work-life balance which has kicked in the Treasury, which doesn't seem to make a lot of sense. And it just reminds people, we all know there's a lot of freebies floating around in politics. In the grand scheme of things, there's a few £100s on some tickets to the National Theatre, a big deal. Probably not. But at a time when people are really under the cosh economically, and then they see this, it just reinforces the sense that they're...
And also, particularly since she came out and said that after the Sabrina Carpenter freebies, she said, oh, obviously that was a mistake. I won't be doing any more of that. Knowing full well that there were previous ticket stories that hadn't come out that would come out. So, she can't sort of win for losing. And so, as soon as this came out, everyone went, well, hang on a minute, I thought you said you weren't going to take any more free tickets. And then she's going, yeah, but I took these before I said that. And it's not a justification. It just makes you look completely idiotic. And basically, yet another embarrassment, says Tory MP Gareth Davis, for a Chancellor who seems to be hooked on handouts and hopelessly out of her depth. And I said yesterday, she went all the way to Washington last week to have a meeting with the IMF, which didn't go well after they completely downgraded Britain's economy and said that growth was even going to be worse than ever. And since she's come back, she's had nothing to say about the trade conversations that she had, because clearly she didn't get anywhere. And so she's got no deal from America. She's got nothing good to say about the economy. All we've got is stories about her taking more freebies.
And that's a really good point, that this whole freebie scandal would have probably gone away quicker if Labour were doing anything good, if they were actually delivering for people, if they had a kind of programme that was popular rather than the sort of cold sick they generally offer up on most issues. It's these things wouldn't bother them as much, because of the fact that you would kind of brush it off.
Yeah, of course.
It's dogged them precisely because they've got nothing else to talk about.
Well, and also, obviously, if you're performing well in your job, people are more likely to forgive you for one or two sort of peccadillos.
Exactly.
But if you're making a complete horse's arse, if you'll pardon the expression, of the economy. Everything she does goes wrong. Everything she says doesn't work out. Every single, rep tax. I mean, there's another story today about house prices, which have apparently plummeted, and the housing market has died effectively because of the stamp duty that they've increased on everybody for first-time buyers. So now if you're buying a house, and I know not many people will be buying a house worth £500,000, but in the southeast people are doing it, and they've gone from having to pay stamp duty of £3 and a bit grand to 10. Which is stopping people from buying houses. They're just not doing it.
No, and it does feel like, whether it's Rachel Reeves or Keir Starmer, they've got like the reverse Midas touch. Like everything they touch turns to. It's just absolutely shocking how on every issue, even things that you would expect a Labour government to do some relatively popular things on, none of that's materialised.
They can't do anything at all. Let's get a voice note from Jonathan on Net Zero.
Hi, Mike. This is Jonathan here. I'm actually living in Berlin, and my electricity is €323 a month. And when I look at the breakdown of the bill, the majority of money I'm paying is in tax, in subsidies for green energy companies. So the only people, it seems to me, that are making any money out of this net zero nonsense are multi-millionaires. I personally think that people have not bought into this net zero and never, ever will.
Yeah, I think that's absolutely right. And if anybody looks at their own electricity bill in this country, I'm assuming, Jonathan, you're talking about your bill in Germany as opposed to your bill maybe back here. But it sounds eerily familiar to people who live back here in Britain, where you get a massive amount of green subsidy. You get the standing charge, which is also there to apparently help bail out electricity companies that went bust Don't ask me why. And all of the pricing of everything is based on us giving money to some very wealthy people to make them more wealthy. No, it doesn't make any sense.
And that's one of the things which has made it so difficult to take on this whole net zero agenda, is that there's so many people who have sort of interest in it. You know, the politicians are sort of bought into it on a level of ideology. All the supranational institutions love it because it means they can come up with plans and make decisions over the heads of, you know, nations and their citizens. And you've got all these companies which have really got into greenism, partly because it gives them a kind of moral glow, they think, but also because there's a lot of money to be made and a lot of subsidy to be hoovered up if they get involved in it. So that's why it's been this huge kind of blockage and this sort of blob that has to be taken on. But hopefully the cracks are starting to show.
This is the thing, you know, this whole GB Energy nonsense, which Keir Starmer keeps going on about, is basically they've set up some quango in order to suck in some taxpayers' money and give it out to some other people, in the hopes that it might attract a few investors with real money, which it's not doing. So, you know, we are where we are. It's going to be a hot day all round, says Mike in Erith. Sunrise in Erith. He sent me a lovely picture. I've never wanted a smart meter, says Margaret in Birmingham. Why should we be forced to have something we don't want? Well, I think that's a very good point. I'd be interested to hear from all of you out there as to what they're actually telling you, because I was pretty much given no choice at all. You know, and apart from anything else, most annoyingly, when they come to fix it in, apparently you have to wait around for 4 hours because they don't know exactly what time they'll be there. And I was like, what? 4 hours? Brilliant. 6:35.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Welcome back to Morning Glory. 6:37 is the time. We're here with you, of course, all the way through until 10 o'clock. Tom Slater's here with us as well. Here's one from Michelle in Altrincham. She says, Mike, I know someone who worked for British Gas, and this is what they would say. Apparently, no, it is not compulsory to have a smart energy meter in the UK, and in many other countries, energy suppliers are encouraged to offer them, and they may promote the benefits strongly, but you have the right to refuse or delay installation. However, there are a few things to keep in mind. Some energy tariffs are only available to customers with smart meters. Landlords can refuse a smart meter if they pay the energy bill, but the tenant can request one if they pay the bill. Future energy systems are likely to rely more on smart meter data, which could make it harder to access certain services or deals without one. Well, I think that's the problem, isn't it? You know, they can't, in the end, force you to have one, but it's quite persuasive if they say, well, if you don't get one fitted, you might not have any electricity.
Yeah, they can make life difficult for you.
They can, or it might cost an awful lot more money, or you might not be able to get, you know, this cheap tariff or whatever it is, you know. So most people will just go, oh, all right then. I mean, I've resisted it for as long as I can, but it doesn't seem as if you can resist it anymore.
No, certainly not, especially with this big switchover happening, which seems to have caught a lot of people.
Exactly right. A couple of stories to tell you related to the animal kingdom before we move on to Nigel Farage and illegal migrants. A pet tortoise has been found after it ran away from a garden it sneaked out of 9 months ago. Owner Rachel Etches mounted a social media campaign in vain last July to trace her beloved pet Leonardo It was totally my fault. We were out in the garden. I got distracted, and he just wandered off. I mean, I can sympathise with this. I had a pet tortoise as a kid, and we used to keep it in the garden, which was like a shared garden, and we sort of had planks around the sort of general area that it was in. And one day we went down and it was gone, and it just escaped. And you go, how can you have a tortoise escape from you?
Did you ever find him?
No, never found him. No. We called him Hieronymus, showing that we lived in Hampstead at the time. And my dad was an artist. He liked Hieronymus Bosch. We never saw him again. But I was a bit sort of disappointed, really, because I thought, well, how can you be so useless at looking after animals that you've allowed a tortoise to run away?
And that's the other thing. Like, they're not exactly making chase, are they?
They're pretty slow. I mean, they are pretty slow. So
apparently, got about a mile down the road in about the space of 9 months. Leonardo. So that's probably pretty good going.
That's not bad.
At that speed.
And then the other one is a vet who's in the Times today issuing a warning to cat owners, saying that if your cat likes to lie out in the sun, which it's likely to do today, you should put sun cream on it. I mean, it sounds mad, doesn't it?
I can't imagine the cat would be very cooperative with that manoeuvre, you know.
No, I mean, it's a sad story, actually, about a veterinary surgeon called Katie Wood, who says that she's had owners who have had to have their cat's ears amputated because they've got cancer of the ear from sitting in the sun, which I've never heard of, but apparently that's a thing. And so they say you should apply sun cream to, at the very least, cat's ears. I think you'd get scratched to death if you tried to do that, wouldn't you?
Pretty big flaw in that plan, I think.
I think so.
You know, you could try and reason with the cat. You could try and say it's for your own health, but I dare say it'll fall on deaf ears.
And what kind is it 30 you put on a cat, or 50?
Yeah, how high are we talking?
How high do we go?
Just a fine mist of it, will that do?
Yeah,
you know.
that might work. Oh, dear. Let's cheer ourselves up again with something from Meghan Markle this morning as well. She's done a new podcast with somebody called Jamie Kern-Lima, who I've never heard of, but who's apparently one of these American podcasters who does quite well. The only thing that I find fascinating about this is that this Jamie Kern-Lima seems to be even more weird and strange than Meghan Markle. Check it out, have a look.
So beautiful. Oh, I don't know, I wasn't expecting that one. Yeah, they're just it's just so great. This is why it's so nice to not have makeup on. Thank you. We spend so much of our life trying to prove something, to prove that you're enough. You have to prove that you're pretty enough. You have to prove that you're smart enough. You prove that you're a good wife or a good friend. And I was like, I am just so done with the prove it game. And if you can't see it, I don't need to prove to you why that's your loss. Because I know that I'm a great friend. And I know the kind of mom I am, and I know the kind of human being I am, and I know how I show up. And I love being able to be that person.
Yeah, so does everybody else know what kind of a friend she is, particularly all those people that she's dumped who weren't very much used to her anymore.
No, absolutely.
I know I'm a good person, is what she says at one point.
This is what California does to people.
It does.
Like, it's too much therapy brain, too much talking about yourself.
Yeah.
It's just, they don't even realise how absurd they sound to other people.
No.
Like, that clip has gone around the internet so many times, and people, it's like kind of staring in, peeking in on madness,
people
but they just don't understand.
No, people are going, can you get through this?
Yeah.
And it's really quite difficult. It really is. This is a longer version of it. And I got through about half of it. I went, I can't.
Yeah.
And it just kind of, it's almost like a car crash. You're kind of just staring at it going, how can they be this vacuous? How can they be?
In a nutshell, that's why the Harry and Meghan thing was never really going to work in terms of her coming over here and, you know, winning over everyone. It's that just on a kind of fundamental cultural level, British people can't stomach that level of schmaltz. Like, we can't do it.
No.
Self-deprecation, all the rest of it, that's more of our bag. But anything that worthy and self-obsessed just grates against the national character in a very real way.
And there's lots of, the slightly longer version, there's lots of pictures of this woman, whatever her name is, Jamie Kern-Lima, sort of closing her eyes and kind of just, you know, wishing for something. Or I don't know what she's doing, but she's quite strange.
It's just, this is your mind on too much therapy, I think.
Yeah.
Too much therapy culture is what it does to you.
And incredible. And also Meghan has revealed, I think, I'm not sure if it's in this same podcast, that she's had a nanny for years, despite all this talk about, you know, we've built this great family and, you know, we've got 2 wonderful children and we've done it against all the odds.
Got a staff of 2 dozen, you know,
exactly right.
looking after.
Well, I think they have. I mean, they used to travel with nannies and all the rest of it. I mean, this idea that they're kind of, you know, like normal mom and pop kind of, you know, parents. They're really not.
No, absolutely, like kind of tending to the bees in the morning and the chickens in the afternoon. This kind of very wholesome almost like homesteady image they're trying to put out there. It's people just aren't.
I love the idea of people sort of in Montecito dodging cups being thrown, you know, every time Megan loses her temper, you know, and going, oh God, you don't go in the kitchen, you know. Let's get a voice note from Nick on Net Zero.
Hi, Mike. Nick from Solihull. About your solar panels, someone said to me many years ago that as soon as you get a bit of dust on them, like a film of dust, once there's been a dew or a shower and the dust off the fields or wherever they are, they settle like your windscreen. They come very inefficient, which is going to happen most of the time. And also, sorry, how can you clean them if they're on top of your house, if to keep them clean? That's another thing, isn't it? Thank you.
Yeah, it's very true. Presumably you have to get one of those big, long kind of poles with a mop on the end of it so you can wipe them down. But yeah, I mean, that's an issue, clearly, because they could get covered in leaves, presumably. Yeah. They can get covered in all sorts of muck that's flying around in the atmosphere. They could get, you know, broken. Yeah. Something could fall on them. Birds could, you know, do things on them, I presume. I mean, there's a lot more to this, I think.
No, and especially if you're just, you know, slapping them on all houses and flat blocks, whether or not they want it or not. You can imagine like a kind of housing block in London not particularly well looked after by whoever owns it and stuff. Right. It's just going to be there gathering leaves and dust.
Yeah, right.
You know.
Yeah, exactly right. Coming up, we're going to find out what Nigel Farage had to say yesterday to Keir Starmer, and we'll talk some more about the migrant problem in this country. 34,000 now apparently have come since July of last year when the Labour Party got in. So stopping the boat's not really what they're doing, certainly not smashing the gangs. 6:45.
There's a vociferous section of other communities that think the IOPC isn't anti-police. They think actually they're pro-police, and that's why they never prosecute anyone, successfully prosecute.
Yes.
So the IOPC are desperate to convince certain communities, and you know, Chris Cabba would be part of one of the communities I'm talking about, and go, look, you know, we've got to establish that, you know, we're on their side and we're going to take this to the nth degree.
Yeah.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Welcome back to Morning Glory, 6:48. I'm Mike Graham with you all the way through, of course, until 10. 4 glorious hours of Morning Glory every single weekday morning. Tom Slater's here. We've got lots going on, lots to talk about, of course. Alan in Merseyside says, on solar panels on all new houses, what happens after 18 years when they fail? Will the government pay for new replacements? Well, that's a very good point, because also that is the problem, isn't it? And one here from somebody who doesn't give a name. I've asked for a smart meter. My bill is £1,100 for 4 months electric to help keep on top of it. They said I'm on a list. It seems they don't like giving them to flats. Well, I think part of the problem is they haven't got enough of them. They haven't got enough people to put them into position. So that's the problem. So 300,000 people might be without one when the switchover actually happens. But let's talk to Kinsey Schofield, who is our favourite royal commentator, of course, here at Talk. She needs to talk to us. We just watched, I'm afraid, one of the most bizarre Meghan Markle clips of all time with this Lima woman, Kinsey. Very good morning to you. Even by her standards, it's really ropey, isn't it?
Oh my goodness. I mean, the worst part is that this was a two-parter, you know? So if you didn't get enough the first time, you could switch over to Meghan's. The first episode was featured on Jamie Kern Lima's podcast, and she is a female entrepreneur that made her money off the backs of women's insecurities. She is a makeup entrepreneur, and they both sit there and yes, and they both sit there and gloat about how the fact that they're being so raw that they're not wearing makeup so that they can cry. And then on the next day, they did another chat on Meghan's podcast. So if you really if no Ozempic needed this week, you just turn on these two ladies and everything's going to come right back up.
Oh my God. I thank you for warning me about that. I'll keep an eye out so I can avoid it. King Charles on the front pages this morning, very much after his statement yesterday. He made a very heartfelt little sort of statement about his cancer. My rebellious hope is what it says on the front page of The Sun. Obviously, he's saying that he was inspired by Dame Deborah James, a woman who you might not know that well in America, but who was very well known here, a wonderful individual who ended up dying, unfortunately, of cancer at quite a young age, bowel cancer. So the big question a lot of people are asking, and have asked, I suppose, since this statement came out, is how is he?
Well, I think that that's a good question, because the headlines I'm seeing here in the States, for instance, the New York Post, is King Charles gives deeply personal cancer update, reflecting on the darkest moments of illness. I did not necessarily feel that that's what the tone was. In classic King Charles form, I felt like he was trying to shine light on other people and not make it about him. Right. It wasn't a Meghan Markle moment. He was saying, let's celebrate the people that are affected by this, not just the cancer patients, but their family members, the NHS staff, the nurses, the doctors, everybody that is so negatively affected by this. How is he doing? He is an older gentleman who is living with cancer and receiving treatment on a regular basis. I mean, it's hard to think about the fact that just in January we learned that Catherine was in remission, and it was such a huge celebration. And unfortunately, we haven't had similar news when it comes to the king.
No, that's right. And it will be, I'm assuming, of great comfort to a lot of people who are going through something similar. And there are an awful lot of people in this country and everywhere who are going through something similar.
Absolutely. I just think that, to me, it was such a sweet message, because he was trying to deflect, and it's not about him, it's about you. It's about how this disease has affected you and your home and the people that you know. And I think that that's one of the things that makes the royal family so special, and that's why they're not celebrities. That's why they're a little step above celebrities, because their ultimate objective is to raise awareness for things like some of these charities he was celebrating last night, and bring hope. And what you've seen, what you mentioned at the very beginning of this discussion about Meghan, and what we see from the Sussexes is complete opposite of what we see from the royal family, which is a lot of selflessness.
Yes, exactly right. They talk about it, the Meghan and Harry brigade, but they don't actually practice it, because he's off to Las Vegas, I'm told. What's he doing there?
He's off to Las Vegas for the Diana Awards, but let me tell you, my favorite Prince Harry Las Vegas story does involve nudity and TMZ. And so it always surprises me when he heads back to Las Vegas, because I'm like, you know what, Prince Harry, that's where you really... that was your reintroduction to American society, and we all were pretty thrilled with it.
Yeah, exactly right. I remember the naked pool pictures when he was, and I'm not talking about swimming pool, I'm talking about the game of pool, where he was playing with a load of strippers, which is when everybody quite liked the boy, and everyone thought he was actually up to no good, and it was great. I'm amazed she's letting him go on his own, that she's sending a chaperone with him.
Well, are you amazed? How often do we see these two with each other genuinely anymore? I mean, when we do see Prince Harry with Meghan, she is speaking at something she probably bullied her way into and isn't qualified to be at like the Time 100 summit. And he looks more like her security guard or a professional car door opener than her husband. So I'm not surprised that she's not going with him to Vegas. She didn't attend the aviation awards with him in LA this last week, where he's standing there next to Wyatt Earp, Kurt Russell. My God, I'd be there in a heartbeat. John Travolta and some of these legitimate Hollywood stars, when Meghan can't get anybody to return her phone calls.
Yeah, but she doesn't like being in the same room as anybody that she thinks might be a bit more famous than her, right?
Or her husband, apparently.
Yes, no, indeed. Absolutely right. Good to see you, Kinsey. Thank you very much indeed. Kinsey Schofield, royal commentator there on the latest from all sorts of parts of the royal family and some parts formerly of the royal family, of course, as well. Tom Slater's here. We should have a look at the immigrants, the migrant stories today, and Nigel Farage. Have we got time to play that? I think we have. Here's Nigel Farage talking in Prime Minister's Questions yesterday.
Mr. Speaker, to date so far this year, 10,000 young, undocumented males have illegally crossed the English Channel into our country, a 40% increase on this time last year, many coming from cultures that are somewhat alien to ours. They are being housed at a cost of many billions of pounds a year in hotels and increasingly in private rented homes. The effect on communities is one of a sense of deep unfairness, actually bordering on resentment. Is it not time to admit that Smash the Gangs was nothing more than an election slogan and not a policy? And isn't it time to declare a national emergency and to act accordingly?
Prime Minister. Mr. Speaker, we are passing a borders bill with extensive powers to smash the gangs. These are terrorist-like powers that give powers to the police to intercept where they think the suspects are committing people smuggling, which is a vile trade. We must take back control of our borders after the last government lost control. But what did he and his party do? Did they support those extra measures to actually smash the gangs? No, they went in the lobby with this lot in their new coalition to vote against them.
Poor old Starmer. He says, what, if they've a suspicion that the people smugglers might be committing a crime, well, surely by getting in a dinghy with people smugglers, you are committing a crime. I mean, that's all you need to know, isn't it?
No, absolutely. And also, all we need to know is that those numbers that Farage was quoting there speak for themselves. I mean, Keir Starmer tried to pull off this trick, which is to say, I'm really going to sort out this problem because the Tories were just unserious. They just posture this, waste all this money and time on Rwanda. They couldn't really deliver. Well, we've got the receipts now, and you've got record-breaking numbers. He hasn't smashed the gangs, he's smashed the records. So Starmer at least recognises that he needs some kind of response. He's not, you know, deflecting or we've deflected, but he's not kind of trying to pretend this isn't an issue. But we all know he hasn't got the solution to it.
No, he hasn't. And isn't it ridiculous the way that's, the heckling that goes on whenever Nigel Farage raises the issue, almost as though they don't understand that people are watching them. And these MPs who are sort of shouting at him, as one of the guy behind him saying, "When are you going to pay for it then? Why don't you pay for it?" You know, these sort of really childlike responses to a very serious issue just makes them look idiotic.
And I think that kind of response also plays to Farage. If if you don't like Nigel Farage, then just sort of jeering and looking like you're just offended by him even raising the issue, or you take more umbrage at the language with which he might use rather than the issue itself. It's just grist to his mill, surely. So really I don't understand why they do it. It's so self-defeating.
It is. It just shows you how out of touch they are. Asylum claimant, or a migrant of the day, if you like, is a Ghanaian asylum seeker who's won a human rights claim to remain in the UK because he's too traumatised by getting COVID to return home. This is a new low, I think.
Exactly, he's got COVID PTSD is how they're describing it. I didn't realise that was an affliction.
Post-COVID-19 syndrome.
There you go.
Who knew?
In all these immigration tribunals, they just need to have like someone like the kind of cool BS person who just stands there and goes, I'm sorry. This is, you you can't get PTSD from having COVID. If you did, then surely that's something that you could be treated for in your home country. But these stories are just piling up day after day.
Well, at least we know who this guy is, because mostly we don't get to even find out what their names are. He's Winfred Kwabla Dogby, 52, diagnosed with post-traumatic stress disorder and a moderate major depressive disorder. I don't know what that is. Then it says that there's practically non-existent treatment for this kind of thing in Ghana, so he can't go back, and he could suffer a rapid in severe decline in his mental health. Well, so could we all, couldn't we?
No, absolutely. And, you know, it's one of those things where I can't imagine anyone was keeping a straight face in that tribunal. No. But they just seem to rubber stamp all of these things.
They do. Well, as I say,
doesn't matter how ridiculous
we do one every day, and that one is about as ridiculous as they get. Let's go to a quick voice note from Nick.
Hey Mike, it's Nick Moore from Loughborough. Once again, Kemi Badenoch missed the wide open goal of Tony Blair's intervention on Ed Milliamp's ridiculous obsession with net zero. And while she handled the grooming gang's question quite well, this open goal was there to be taken. She could have made him look ridiculous, and once again, she didn't. Have a good day, Mike.
Thank you very much indeed, Nick and Loughborough. Tom, very good to see you. Thank you very much indeed. We're going to be heading off into the next hour after the news. We've got plenty to talk about, including, of course, what is going on behind the scenes at the Labour government, because it looks as though there is a war internally over net zero. Ed Miliband has got his side of the game. We've got Tony Blair with the other side. You've got Keir Starmer in the middle, dithering, of course, not knowing what on earth to do about it. We'll take your calls, 0344 499 1000. You can text us on 87222. Find us on X at talkTV. We'll be back after this.
You said you don't like Polish people and you don't trust them.
That's not what I said.
Yes, that's what you said.
No. You must have misheard me. I like Polish people a lot.
Christ me, I never heard of this from you. I've heard this on the radio.
Okay. Well, I'll tell you what. You want to have a listen? Have a listen to what I said. Okay. Listen to this.
Yes.
I don't like Poles. I wasn't talking about Polish people.
Yes.
I was talking about polls, you know, when you do a poll to find out what people think. You know, like they say 55% of people vote Remain, 45% vote Leave. That's a poll. I wasn't talking about...
but later on you said you don't trust them, so you don't...
I don't trust them. No, that's true. I don't trust polls, and I don't like polls because I don't trust them. But that's not Polish people.
No, that's what I thought. That's what I pick up.
Oh, I'm terribly sorry. Listen, well, I would never say anything like that.
No, so in this case, I never learned English.
No, listen, it's fine. It's absolutely fine. I'm very glad you called in because I wouldn't want you walking around thinking that Mike Graham is a horrible bigot. He doesn't like Polish people.
No, I was thinking, what the hell? What's going on here? Actually, I'm actually back and explain a few things.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is...
Welcome back to Morning Glory. It is a glorious morning, and it is, of course, May Day, the day when workers of the world unite, the day when everybody's supposed to feel happy going about their everyday business. But, of course, in this country, we don't feel particularly happy waking up on May Day, even though it could well be the hottest day of the year, and you might be able to get out and about, put your shorts on, and enjoy a couple of pints in a nearby hostelry. That is, if it's not too expensive for you to actually put some money down on the till, whether it's cash or whether it is, in fact, a credit card of some kind or another. or a contactless card even. It is also election day. We can't talk about anything that's going on from now because the polls are open, so please don't tell us anything about what you're likely to be doing with regard to that, because we're going to be talking about all manner of other things. And there's plenty of other things to talk about, by the way. There's a net zero war going on behind the scenes inside Downing Street. It looks as though Tony Blair really set the cat amongst the pigeons yesterday when he came out and said that the whole net zero project was doomed to failure. He then spent a bit of time trying to row back from it when he got a phone call from one of Keir Starmer's operatives saying it's not very helpful tone for you to be criticising the government and saying they're completely and utterly bleeding useless, which is effectively what he said. And he's now saying, well, no, that's not exactly what I meant. Well, I think it is exactly what you meant. Him and Ed Miliband do not see eye to eye, and Miliband himself is now under threat of losing his job because it turns out that the net zero policy is a complete bundle of tosh and it won't work and nobody wants it. And it's too expensive. Apart from that, it's a great idea. 0344 499 1000. Theo Usherwood's coming up with more news on that front. What else is going on in the big wide world of politics? The unions are now kicking off as well. They've been listening to Morning Glory, obviously, as the same way as the former Prime Minister was. And they've now said, we don't fancy net zero either because it doesn't guarantee any jobs, which is also true. We'll be talking about that. Plus, more cyber attacks hitting the high street. We've had Marks and Spencer's pretty much put out of business practically, but they're managing to somehow get things back under control over the last 24 hours. But yesterday, the Co-op was also hit with cyber attacks, which made it impossible for people to buy anything there. Absolutely incredible stuff. We'll also be talking about how Rachel Reeves is in trouble again with the sleaze watchdog over more freebie tickets. And also, of course, we'll be finding out about that story that Kemi Badenoch was pushing yesterday in Prime Minister's Questions. Where on earth is the grooming gangs inquiry? And where is it actually going? Because Keir Starmer promised 5 separate local inquiries. So far, only one has been announced. We'll also be talking to Maggie Oliver later on because there was a documentary last night on Channel 4, which we want to show you a little bit on as well. Let's get a quick voice note from Simon.
Good morning, Mike. Simon from Buckinghamshire. It's not often I give Channel 4 any praise, I can assure you, but this documentary, Groomed, is something that people need to watch. I just wonder if they're going to be making sure everyone watches that in secondary school. I think not, but they should. Have a great day, Mike. Enjoy the weather.
Simon, thank you very much indeed. I don't expect Keir Starmer's going to be recommending that because he's frightened to death of the grooming gangs, the rape gang scandal. This is Morning Glory, and we are here until 10 o'clock. I've got this from Alison Gray on the subject of net zero. Alison from East Sussex, she says, net zero is madness, arbitrary targets as opposed to an aim alongside using our existing resources. Trying to force the market, attacking the public with penalties, whether cars or boilers, etc., is wrong. A good part of the money being spent should be used for mitigations, new reservoirs, nuclear power stations, fracking of gas with storage facilities for the gas, roads being repaired well to be resilient, planting trees for natural carbon capture. Growth would come from these infrastructure projects. Most important as well, stop illegal immigration and reduce the number of people here using our resources. Well, I think that's another big issue that nobody really talks about. The fact that net zero is also going to likely make the electricity grid less resilient, and we could then be faced with problems like they had in Spain and Portugal this week, because at the end of the day, more electricity demand means more pressure on the grid system. More people makes more demand. So the more people there are in this country, and we now know there's 34,000 more people here than there were in July of last year who have come illegally. There's more electricity being used, there's more pressure on the system, and therefore the system is less resilient. It's not rocket science, it really isn't. 7 minutes past 7, let's talk to Theo Usherwood, political commentator, of course. Theo, very good morning to you.
Very good morning to you, Mike. Great to be with you.
It's very good to see you. I mean, this intervention from Tony Blair, which we talked about yesterday, seems to have kicked off all manner of little skirmishes behind the scenes at Downing Street. Clearly, there's been a lot of frantic phone calls being made between the office of the Prime Minister and the office of Tony Blair. He's kind of tried to row back a bit on what he said, but he hasn't really been able to convince anyone of that because he's essentially correct when he says that, you know, the idea of net zero, the way the government are running it, is doomed to failure. And it now looks as though Ed Miliband might be the sort of the sacrificial lamb on this one.
Yes, absolutely. And you're quite right to mention Ed Miliband because actually Tony Blair, as we were talking about yesterday, is seen as the godfather, if you like, of those MPs within the Labour Party who actually want to be in government rather than just shouting from the sidelines, those on the far left.
Yeah.
He's now come out, of course, and said what he said about net zero. Most of your people, all of your listeners are going to suddenly find themselves agreeing with Tony Blair. Even the trade unions, as you mentioned there, Unites, the union, which is the far left union, the biggest union within the Labour Party. It donates millions of pounds to the Labour Party year on year to fund it. Its General Secretary Sharon Graham has now found herself in alignment with Tony Blair. It is quite an achievement for a Labour Prime Minister to unite Tony Blair and unite the union. But Keir Starmer has somehow managed to do it against him. And this net zero policy. But the phone calls, and you mentioned the phone call there to Tony Blair saying, look, this is particularly unhelpful from number 10. But what was interesting was that after Prime Minister's questions yesterday, the Prime Minister's spokesman was asked, could he guarantee that Ed Miliband, the Energy and Net Zero Secretary, actually, could he guarantee that he'll be in job by the time of the next election? Now, it's worth remembering, there is a precedent for this. Rachel Reeves and David Lammy both have that assurance that they're going to keep their jobs as Chancellor and Foreign Secretary respectively. But he would provide, the Prime Minister's spokesman, no guarantee for Ed Miliband. This can be seen as a double-edged sword. Firstly, obviously, it's a criticism of Keir Starmer and the way that the government has followed this net zero policy to hit zero carbon emissions by 2050. But it can also be seen, Mike, this is important, as cover potentially for abandoning those policies, those net zero policies. Because if Tony Blair says it, then it must be acceptable. That's the idea within, that's what's being talked about. Right. And that would mean jettisoning Ed Miliband as the Energy Secretary, getting rid of him, bringing in somebody who's actually got some idea about energy security, ensuring that actually we can turn the lights on in 5-10 years' time and we don't end up like Spain and Portugal.
Well, exactly right. And also, just the other day, it was the government's kind of initiative, wasn't it, to push out the idea that they were not going to infringe or impinge upon people's rights and impinge on people's pockets if the net zero plan was to be rolled out properly, that they wouldn't ask them to make sacrifices, they wouldn't ask them, to install things that they didn't want to install, or to stop doing something that they wanted to continue doing, for example, like not flying on holiday or not, eating meat and all this kind of thing. So there's a very mixed message coming out of Downing Street right now. And also, I'm looking at the Times this morning, which often is quite a good weather vane for what's coming out of at least one part of Downing Street. They've got this story saying solar panels will go on all new homes in a new push for net zero over the next, in 2 years' time. I don't believe the story, not because the Times isn't a great newspaper, but because I think that it's been leaked by some very pro-net zero types inside of Downing Street.
Yes, and it will put up the cost of buying a new house. And if the government has a target to hit 1.5 million new homes by 2030, that's an ambitious target. It's going to be very difficult to meet. Many people doubt that they're going to be able to meet that target. Then you've got to make those homes affordable. And if you're putting solar panels on every single home that you build, those homes are going to become less affordable to people who want to get onto the housing ladder, first-time buyers. You may be able to save money in the future, but we know what happened to the original promise to cut energy bills by £300 from the Labour's last general election. That's suddenly gone missing. That's not being repeated by ministers at the dispatch box any longer because they know that it's very unlikely to be delivered. But you're right to say there is there are mixed messages coming out. There's a row going on, Mike. You get mixed messages when they can't agree about how they should approach this particular policy. That there's a difference of opinion about what needs to actually happen, and that's why we've got many of your listeners will just be confused about what it is this government wants to achieve.
Well, that's the problem, isn't it? And you can tell that there are two different factions. I'm not quite sure where Morgan McSweeney sits on this, but I suspect he's more of the pragmatist than he is of the sort of the green dreamer of the spires or whatever it is that they're going to have in the great green new world. But there's also a disingenuous part to people like Miliband. And I was listening to Carla Denyer as well, the Green Party co-leader, leader yesterday, where they talk all the time about savings that we're going to be making in the future, which are not savings that we're currently making. For example, it was only, 2 weeks ago, I think, Sadiq Khan and Miliband made a big deal of putting 2.5 million quid worth of solar panels on the roofs of schools in London. And they said this is going to save them all money in the future. But it's all on the sort of never. It's all like, oh, yeah, well, the electricity bills will all come down. Well, so far, whenever they've said that, they've done nothing of the sort. In fact, they've gone up. So all this talk of, we're saving money by installing solar powers. Well, actually, you're spending £2.5 million worth of taxpayers' money without any real guarantee of it coming back. If you were going to a bank with that kind of business plan, they wouldn't lend you any money.
Yes, and it's worth noting that, the government said it wants to help working people.
Yeah.
I remember when they introduced the ultra-low emission zone, you would have carers, you would have plumbers, you'd have electricians in tears because suddenly they were going to, the ultra-low emission zone charge is so high on a daily basis, more north of £12, that it's unaffordable. So you have to upgrade your car. And that's the problem with this, is that you're asking people who don't have a lot of money, who are facing tough times economically, the economy is not doing well at the moment, and it is going to get worse, to suddenly put their hands in their pockets for to pay more to implement your policy. And I think there is some naked politics to this whole thing, because, of course, you mention Ed Miliband and Khalid Denia. There's always a danger as we look ahead to the next general election and beyond, that you would see, the left, the soft left, who, like the Labour Party, might actually start to fragment and go to parties like the Greens or the Liberal Democrats.
Yeah, and that's exactly the problem, because those people who believe in all this kind of mad net zero zealotry will never be moved, will they? They'll never believe actually that you can actually make sacrifices on your side, and you can actually maybe water down a little bit what it is you need to do to save the planet, because they're so obsessed with saving the planet they can't actually see that they're damaging the country's economy in the meantime.
Yeah, and just on the jobs point, the idea that you spend money now. Okay, there's a consumer-facing angle to this. What I'm going to pay on my energy, what you're going to pay for your energy bills, or whether you're going to have to upgrade your car and get an electric car and all of that. But it's worth mentioning that part of the promise is that there'll be jobs. Yeah. And we saw, Jürgen Mayer from GB Energy, this sort of Quango, where it isn't a Quango company, that's set up to supply, to run the country's energy system. Yeah. Saying, well, yes, we can have jobs, and they may happen in 20 years' time. Right. Well, if you're working up on the northeast coast, and you're working, you're going out to drill for oil for one of the major petrochemical companies in the North Sea, and that company is divesting from their assets, their oil rigs in the North Sea, because they know that there are no new licenses, and you're being told there'll be a job in 20 years' time. That doesn't help you much, Mike Graham. No. It doesn't do anything for you, does it?
It doesn't. And also, we've got the Telegraph this morning, the energy minister from Norway popping over to say, basically his name is Terje Asland, I believe, telling the Daily Telegraph that Norway's got a totally different view to the UK and the oil and gas industry, and he's saying don't give up on oil. And quite often you see British politicians looking wistfully over at Scandinavia and saying, look at how brilliantly they run their country, look at how amazing they are with their social care and their fantastic health care, and they might have high taxes, but they do everything really well. Well, guess what? They built a sovereign wealth fund in Norway because of oil, because they continue to drill for it, because it's in their gift to get it, and we're throwing all that away.
Yes, and I know those on the left and the Labour Party and beyond on the left will look at Donald Trump and they'll hold their head in their hands and they'll say, we don't like Donald Trump. He's the drill baby drill slogan. Yeah. We want to save the planet and all the rest of it. But they don't do the same for Norway. Norway, as you say, is seen as a beacon of social liberal democracies, and therefore they would look at those countries and think, well, there's a good example. Well, you have to ask yourself, is that good example now going to extend, that given this minister who's visiting this country has turned around and said, well, actually, it's probably a good idea. We've got a ban on new licenses for North Sea oil and gas. And this is a major asset for us. I mean, this is something where we could actually become energy independent, so that were we to see, God forbid, another war in Ukraine or an Eastern European state where Vladimir Putin decides to invade, and we see a huge spike in imports of the price of importing gas and oil from Russia or other countries, that actually we can actually sit back, our Prime Minister, because they would have invested in North Sea oil and gas, would be able to sit back and say, actually, we don't need to worry. The prices aren't going to go up because we can provide energy to our homes without needing to worry about having to import energy from overseas. It's crazy. We've seen what happened up in Scunthorpe, of course. You know, the blast furnaces where they need this special type of coke. There was a challenge which was successful to prevent getting that coke from being mined in this country, and so we're having to import it from as far away as places like China. And that makes this country and our energy security ultimately much weaker.
It does, indeed. It's good to talk to you, Theo. Thank you very much indeed. Theo Usherwood, political commentator there on the state of our nation when it comes to net zero. Even Norway is saying, you know, buck up your ideas, otherwise you're going to be in a very, very bad place indeed. Let's get a voice note from Steve.
Morning, Mike. Steve in Southport. Question yesterday in the Commons, when Nigel Farage was on talking about the millions of pounds that it's costing the British taxpayer, who are paying to house all these immigrants that are invading our country across the English Channel. And one of the MPs was heckling, saying, well, why don't you pay for it then, to Nigel Farage? It just does not make sense. It's very childish. Does not make sense whatsoever, the statement that he made. And these are the people that are running the country. It's absolutely unbelievable.
It is absolutely unbelievable. He's the guy that you can see there on the screen sitting behind sort of Nigel Farage's right shoulder. We should try and find out who he is, actually, because he does appear to be a complete and utter numpty. All he seems to be doing is heckling right behind Nigel Farage. You can actually hear him quite well on the microphone, which is obviously being activated because Nigel Farage is speaking. And it is pathetic, and it shows how out of touch these characters are. They just think of Nigel Farage as a nuisance and rather an embarrassment, and they don't really want to hear from him. Well, I'm sorry, guys, that's not how democracy works. Got this from Dan in Kent, who says, morning, Mike. Shows the state of our politics when 25 years in, Tony Blair is still the most Conservative Prime Minister of the 21st century. That's true. One from Stuart, he says, morning, Mike. Do you think Tony Blair might be enjoying the chance to stick it to Miliband? After all, Ed ruined the chance of Blairism continuing under his brother, who was a fully paid-up Blairite. I certainly don't think he'll be Ed's biggest fan. Yeah, I hear that there's not much love lost between them, and some are suggesting that that this intervention from Blair was indeed designed to kibosh poor old crazy Ed Miliband and get him pushed out of the way. And that may well be, because the thing you know and the thing you remember, of course, about all of the feuds that go on in politics is that they never die. They never bury the hatchet. They hate each other with a passion for life. And it will probably go on and on and on. I've also got this from Catherine in Whitney, who says, morning, Mike, will you please name the judge in charge of the hearing which allowed the migrant from Ghana to stay in this country? It would be a really useful feature if you named and shamed the judges who make these decisions every day. Well, I can tell you, I don't know the first names of the judges, but there was a panel, an immigration panel, which is often the case where there's more than one judge, and it was made of Upper Tribunal Judge Khan and Deputy Upper Tribunal Judge Gill. They said that he was satisfied that Dogby's health conditions persist and agreed that he was a seriously ill person. Well, I'm sorry, I don't care whether you're a seriously ill person. What does that mean for me? Whether your right to live here or not is impinged by that, it shouldn't matter. If you're seriously ill, you can go be seriously ill in your own country. Go and be seriously ill in Ghana. What's wrong with Ghana? It's a perfectly decent place to be. There's nothing wrong with it. There's no war going on. You know, the idea that you might not get as good a treatment here as he would get on the NHS, I find hard to believe. It's probably better than the NHS, if anything, knowing what we know about the NHS. 0344 499 1000. Another voice note here from Steve. No? Is that the same one? Oh, we don't have that one. Sorry, I've gone mad. 22 minutes past 7. We're back after this.
If Britain and France and Italy and particularly Germany cannot put 26,000 troops on the ground in Ukraine, I would be staggered. I know as part of this, the Finns and the Swedes and the Poles have said we can't be part of it because we're abutting Russia. You know, if you stop the Russians in Ukraine, the Finns and the Poles think that they're going to sweep round to the north and attack them there. So I think this is, I don't know who's trying to get political gain out of this.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Welcome back to Morning Glory, 25 minutes past 7. It is a glorious morning, by the way, as well. It was the hottest day of the year, apparently, yesterday, which was lovely, and it will no doubt be even hotter today. It's May Day, of course. You might normally expect us to be celebrating the workers of the world uniting, but the workers of the world at the moment are pretty much in despair at what is going on, particularly in this country, where there's not much work to be done, where there's very few jobs to be had, and if you do actually manage to get yourself a job, you'll be paying so much money in tax that you won't be able to afford to do anything. That seems to be where we are in Britain. Over in America, of course, they've had a bit of an economic setback as well, because the first quarterly results of the economy came out yesterday, and they weren't great. And Donald Trump, of course, is saying it's nothing to do with him. It's all down to Joe Biden. Of course it is. Ryan Harris is here, journalist and reporter over there. Ryan, very good morning to you.
Good morning to you, Mike.
Yeah, I mean, I suppose you would expect Donald Trump not to take the blame for anything bad, and he would naturally blame Joe Biden for what happens on the figures front. Is he right, though?
You know, you could say he's partially right, Mike, because the figures that came out for the first quarter, of course, cover the last few weeks of the Biden presidency. But there are several factors involved here, and a lot of them lead back to Donald Trump and his policies. Number one is people rushing to buy up as many imported goods as they can before the tariffs all kick in, which is coming very soon and has already started in some cases. And that's a drag on the gross domestic product. You've also got government spending, which is a fair sector of the economy, but not, you know, the main driver of it. And that's also down because Donald Trump and his crew, including Elon Musk and the Department of Government Efficiency, are trying to rein in government spending. And so they're holding back on some of the money. But the main driver is consumers, and they're nervous, so they're holding back. And that really has curbed spending. Now, the drop is 0.3%.
Yeah.
So it's not huge, but the economy had been chugging along at about 2.5% growth a quarter, and now all of a sudden it's down. And, you know, with the stock market also falling, that doesn't help. And, of course, Donald Trump is going to blame Joe Biden because that's what he does. And, you know, of course, he wants to put the, I mean, it's, you know, it's the greatest hits of Donald Trump.
Yeah, of course.
But you know, when you talk about the economy, you know, contracting, he's trying to avoid the R word, recession. I see it in your graphic there. But if we get 2 straight quarters of economic shrinkage, that's considered a recession.
Yeah.
So now we'll be watching for the next quarter.
But I guess what the interesting thing is for me on this one anyways is what you said about the curb on government spending, because I think a lot of people, both in this country and perhaps in the USA, would like to see a bit less government spending, certainly on some of the wrong things that they spend money on. You know, in our case, spending on welfare is way out of control. Spending on immigrants coming into the country, particularly illegal immigrants, which are costing us billions of pounds a year. People would like to see less government spending, and if that has a knock-on effect to the economy, it might, in the long run, not be a bad thing.
Not necessarily. I mean, I'm one who's always firmly believed, number one, that we should really actually put in a real effort to root out government waste.
Yeah.
But, I mean, and we're talking about my personal opinion here. About half of this country is on some kind of dole, and I don't believe that that's always necessary.
No.
Now, there are two, Medicaid and Social Security, which are the 2 biggest areas where we spend, even bigger than defense spending. And, you know, Social Security is one we've paid into. So that one is one they really shouldn't monkey around with, because there's going to be a lot of us who've paid into it. I've been paying into it for, gosh, close to 40 years now. I'd like to have it there and be able to collect it when I'm, going to be 67 now, probably 70 by the time I get there. So the age keeps rising. But, Medicaid is another one, because there are a lot of people who, and it's so much different than, being involved with the NHS. But there are a lot of people who are on some sort of medical assistance, and that's a huge expense. It's like $880 billion, and that was one of the targets of Elon Musk and Doge. But it's one that if you start chipping away at it and start really cutting away at the spending, there are going to be a lot of families, lower income people, and some of them are going to be immigrants, and some of them are going to be illegal. So maybe that could be an area where we could probably cut a little bit. But I mean, those of us who live here and were born here and are citizens here, and need a little help with our the cost for our medical, because it's so expensive here, that's going to hurt a lot of people if they really slash Medicaid.
Absolutely. There was a surprise visit, which we're going to talk about, to the public sphere again last night in the US, but we'll get to her in a minute. Let's have a look first at Donald Trump, not talking about the economy, but talking about the Pope.
As Pope? I'd like to be Pope. That would be my #1 choice. No, I don't know. I have no preference. I must say we have a cardinal that happens to be out of a place called New York who's very good. So we'll see what happens.
Donald Trump there playing with the press again and being asked, who would you like to see as the next Pope? I mean, I suppose it's a question you would ask the President of the United States of America. But, I mean, as he says, it's not really his call, is it?
No, not at all. And I don't believe Donald Trump is even Catholic. So I do appreciate your graphic there, orange to white. That's pretty good. I don't know if I'd want the job. I think Pope is probably almost as tough as being president of the United States. Plus, I don't look great in white. I'd be better in the Cardinals outfit because black is more slimming. But, I mean, we're all going to have a say. But anybody who knows anything about Vatican politics, and I think most of us have at least a vague idea of how it goes, knows that, they can talk about front runners and favorites and who it might be. Might it be the cardinal from the Philippines? Might it be the one from Africa? But Pope Francis wasn't among the favorites, and he ended up, winning in the final vote. So it's just a matter of waiting for that puff of white smoke to come out the chimney there.
Yeah, absolutely right. Could be a while, I guess. Yeah, so the person I was talking about earlier who reinvented herself and who decided to re-enter the public square, she hasn't been there for a while, Kamala Harris. Have a look at this. I mean, nothing much has changed, has it? I mean, that takes you back, doesn't it?
Yeah, it takes me back to the debate, takes me back to the convention speeches, and it's all smiles and waves, and not a lot of substance there.
And that cackle that still doesn't go away. Here's what she had to say about Donald Trump.
In fact, please allow me, friends, to digress for a moment. Okay. It's kind of dark in here, but I'm asking for a show of hands. Who saw that video from a couple of weeks ago, the one of the elephants at the San Diego Zoo during the earthquake? Google it if you've not seen it. So that scene has been on my mind. Everybody's asking me what you've been thinking about these days. Well,
yeah, I mean, I haven't seen it, so I'm not sure what she's getting at there, but apparently it's some kind of dig at Donald Trump. And she's just as useless as she was, a few months back.
Yeah, I mean, if you're going to get out there in front of the people, I would say have something to say. But,
right.
I believe this is something, Mike, that it's not the first time you and I have talked about it. The Democrats really need to have what we here in America often call a come to Jesus moment, where they need to figure out how to get their own house in order. You've got most of the people who are left-leaning who are closer to center, but you've got a Democratic Party that has allowed its far-left progressive wing to run the agenda.
Yeah.
And that's why they lost so badly to Donald Trump in the November election. They're tone deaf when it comes to, what the people even in their own party wants. And, I often think it would be nice if we were, not necessarily a parliamentary system, but if we were like Britain or Canada, where we had multiple parties and you could, put the people in that far left ideology in their own party. But we saw what happened in Canada.
Yeah.
It wasn't the far left candidates that won. It was, it was the people that were closer to center left. In fact, the running joke is Donald Trump, because we've also seen his poll numbers plummet, especially in recent weeks, and in the last 5 most recent polls, they're as bad as they've ever been. But they say Trump is so unpopular that he's even losing elections in other countries. And so, if we could do that, I would love to see us split up the 2 major parties into 4, but there's too much money and too much infrastructure, dialed in for both of them, that it'll never happen. And until they figure out where they're going to get the most votes and be able to appeal to the most people, the Democrats are not going to have power for a long time.
No, it looks very much like that. Just one final thing, Ryan, before I let you go. Overnight, it's been revealed the US Treasury's announced it's agreed to establish an American-Ukrainian Reconstruction Investment Fund. Looks like a sort of minerals deal that was talked about some months ago has come to some fruition, which is an interesting development, to say the least.
Yeah, and I mean, you mentioned it. It's not the first time they've talked about, the United States being involved in taking advantage of the mineral wealth of Ukraine. And, there are other economic opportunities there. And I think Donald Trump, I said when he first did it that he was wise to try to strike that mineral deal before working a peace deal, because if they get peace, then Ukraine's not going to sign any deal to give up its natural resources. And it looks like he's doing the same thing here. And, again, this is an opportunity for President Trump to get the United States in a place where it can take advantage of the economic opportunities there and make some money to help repay the billions and billions of dollars that the United States has sunk into helping Ukraine. Now, do I think it's, a terrible waste of money? Not necessarily. I don't know if I would like to see Mr. Putin start marching across Europe. I mean, we've already been down that road before, and it did not go well until the end. And, thank goodness for our friends in Britain, because if we weren't working together, I always say we'd all be goose-stepping now.
Yeah, well,
but, we've got to do something, and if it means getting back some of the money we've spent, I'm all for it.
OK, good to talk to you. Ryan Harris, thank you very much indeed, journalist and reporter there. Coming up, we're going to be talking to Dr. Dean Eggett, who's, of course, our favourite GP over in the NHS. We'll find out whether he's working today. 7:37.
across the UK. On DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Welcome back to Morning Glory. I'm Mike Graham. It's 7:39. Let's get a voice note from Jay on Grooming Gangs.
Morning, Mike. Great show as always. Channel 4, eh? Well, you're going to get me back as a viewer, I can tell you that now. Talking straight rather than beating around the bush hiding things. Telling the public exactly how it is. Well done. Doesn't matter where they come from, who they are, be British, it doesn't matter. Tell it as it is. That's all the public want, the truth.
Yeah.
Time for these cover-ups to be dealt with.
Totally agree, Jay. The truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth. We'll be talking to Maggie Oliver coming up very shortly in this hour about that Grooming Gangs documentary that was on Channel 4 last night. It's called A National Scandal. Right now, though, it's time to talk to Dr. Dean Eggett, because we keep talking to Dr. Dean about various little problems within the systems at the NHS, not least the waiting list problems. But there's now a story about mistakes on medical records. A new poll revealed that almost 1 in 4 people have found errors in their personal documents. And Dr. Dean, a very good morning to you. He's, of course, CEO of Doncaster Local Medical Committee. We've been hearing a lot of stories anecdotally this week as well from people who always get in touch with us to tell us things, that they're getting letters from hospitals saying, we've got your appointment for blah-de-blah, whatever it is, which is not the problem they're suffering from. So it seems as though the medical records are not being kept up very well.
Good morning, Mike.
Morning.
There is an issue with medical records, but that's probably more human related rather than computer related, because of course computers do what you tell them. They're programmed to carry out a routine that somebody says to do. Unless there's an error in that coding, it does exactly what you ask it to do. So the problem is more likely that humans are putting the wrong information into the computer, and the computer is not necessarily handling that information well. The problem is, of course, computers just get on and do it. So there's no checks and balances in place. Whereas if a human was writing a letter, the human would check and say, oh, well, that's wrong. So removing the human seems to cause some errors in some cases, and actually some catastrophic errors in quite a large number of cases.
I mean, is any of this related to the introduction of different methodology, like AI or anything like that?
Yeah, in part. But again, all of this is about computer coding, really. So there's a couple of really large errors in computer systems. Looking back in 2018, there was a breast screening program that went wrong, where letters weren't sent out to patients inviting them, and around 450,000 patients missed out on their breast screening. And there's an estimate that actually 270 women probably had their lives shortened as a consequence of that. Now, was that the computer system's fault, or was that actually a coding error? It's difficult to know. And we've had similar catastrophes in the NHS, of course, as well. But computers just do at large scale what we ask them to do.
Sure. No, I get all that, and I'm not really trying to blame the computer system necessarily. What I'm saying is that if a quarter of people answering a poll question say that they found inaccuracies or missing details in their medical records, that's more than a sort of fairly small margin of error. It's quite a big error.
It is, but I also have to question that 1 in 4, because I get contacted very regularly by patients saying, look, I've been online, I've seen my medical record, and this doesn't seem right. You talk through it, it is right. It's just a misunderstanding of what the code was, what it means, and requires further explanation. So I suspect in many cases we could bring down that 1 in 4 if actually we were more communicative as medics and said to the patient, look, this is what this is in your medical record. And we've got to remember that medical records were never really there for patients in the first place. They are now. But they weren't.
Well, I was going to say, I mean, can you pull your own medical record? Can you have a look at what it says?
Indeed, you can. Yeah. So medical records were really records for us to remember what we did with the patient, so we know what we do in the future. And it was never translated for patients to understand. You can now go back in your medical record and see what was there tens of years ago, decades ago. So to contact your GP, if you go on your NHS app, you can just look through your medical record simply by going on your NHS app. Something really important here is that the NHS isn't a joined-up organisation. So you can't go to your GP and say, tell me what's in my hospital record, or similarly, go to the hospital and say, what's in my GP record. Actually, we don't talk to each other in that way. The systems are not joined up.
Yeah, so, I mean, if you don't go to your doctor very regularly, I mean, I can't remember the last time I went to my NHS GP. The last time I had something from them, I think it was, they were asking me to see if I wanted to quit smoking. And I haven't smoked for about, 8 years. And I guess they haven't seen me since then, so they don't know. So on my medical record, probably with the GP, it says that I smoke, which I don't.
Yeah, absolutely. And again, really, that's a human error, isn't it? Because as a medic, rather than saying to you, do you fancy quitting smoking? I say, hi, Mike, do you still smoke?
Yeah.
And if you say no, then I'd have updated your medical record.
Right.
Now, the consequence to that, in most cases, actually insurance. So if your insurer writes to your doctor and says, tell me all about this patient, they've given me consent for the information, and the information is out of date, that will affect your life in insurance matters.
Yes.
So it's pretty important that your medical records reflect your current state of health. So,
right. So what should people do then? Should they go to their GP and say, can I check my medical record that you've got for me to see that it's up to date?
The easiest thing to do is to sign up to the NHS app. The NHS app will give you access to your medical record, and then you can browse through it and see if there's anything that needs changing.
Okay.
If there's anything that you think's inaccurate, contact your GP and say, can we talk about this, please?
Yeah, okay. Well, that's good advice for people. And then similarly, will that also include the hospital records, if there are any?
Sadly not. No, hospital records aren't signed up to the NHS app.
So how do you get those then?
Yeah, so that's a little bit more complicated. So to access hospital NHS records, you have to do a subject access request to the hospital. So it's basically a letter saying to the hospital, please, can I have access to my medical record? I'd like to browse them.
Right.
And they should be able to give that to you in either a written format or ask you to sit at a computer and have a look at it.
Right. And will that give you every single hospital you've ever been in then?
No.
You have to go to individual hospitals to get each one?
Yeah, like I said,
that's insane, isn't it?
It is. Like I said, this is a really key, important point. Try not to think of the NHS as an organisation. Think of it as thousands of independent organisations working together. And you've got to contact...
Or possibly not working together.
Absolutely. And you've got to contact each one and say, tell me what you know about me.
Wow. That could be a life's work. You know, by the time you've got all the information, you're probably about to die of old age. But there we are. Good to talk to you, Dr. Dean Eggett. Thank you very much indeed. Imagine that. So you want to find out what your medical record is. You might get something from your GP. That'll give you what the GP knows. Then you go, yeah, well, I had this visit to an A&E some time ago in a hospital, so you better get in touch with that hospital and put in an access request to find out what it was that they got for you. And then you might have gone and, I don't know, been a partner at giving at a birth somewhere else in another hospital. In my case, for example, my three of my kids were born in 3 different hospitals in Britain. So I'd have to go to each of those 3 hospitals to get the access request to find out what they've got on me. And then, what else have I been? Oh, I broke my wrist once. I went to another hospital. I have to go to that hospital. I mean, you'd be spending your entire life trying to figure out what they've got for a medical record for you. It's bonkers, isn't it? Let's get a voice note from James.
Morning, Mike. James from Blackburn. Theo's right. Godfather of Net Zero, Ed Miliband. It's going to be like a scene from The Godfather because it's finished. He's going to wake up with a horse's head in his bed screaming because it is done. It's done. People have come round, yes, Mike, to your way of thinking, your viewers' way of thinking, normal people who know that it's a lot of old cobblers. So we'll be fracking and drilling before we know it. It's going to be beautiful. As Donald Trump was saying, it's going to be beautiful. Oh, I'm feeling quite good, Mike. Sunny day, nice and hot. Nobody telling me that it's too hot and that we're going to have to stay in and no one's going to be scaring us. It's great, Mike. It's just lovely. And we're going into the weekend.
Yeah.
Brilliant. Have a good one.
Well said, James. Very cheery. And don't forget to put some sun cream on the cat, by the way. How about this from Lucas, who says, a Norwegian citizen working in the UK, we have a saying in Norway that roughly translates as, why borrow money when you have gold bars under the bed? Which is how my fellow countrymen and women see the oil and gas in your territory that you are not using. You would rather be borrowing money and paying interest on debts while those gold bars are under your bed. And ironically using that debt to buy oil and gas from Norway, which is extracted from the same sea. Lucas, you're very smart. Thank you for that. That's very good. I like that. Why borrow money when you've got gold bars under the bed? And that's what we're doing. And then we're using the money that we're borrowing to buy the oil and gas from the same sea that Norway are drilling it from. Fantastic. Brilliant. Maggie Oliver's coming next.
And I think he probably wants to sort of give not necessarily an update, but just give an indication of thanks to the people that supported him.
You know what I think of the monarchy. It just worries me.
Yeah, but he's living with cancer. That was an expression that was used not necessarily to him, but he's talking about people living with it, and you can do so. But, to do that, you've got to live with that chemotherapy, and which is incredibly draining. It effectively is poisoning your system.
Yep.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Welcome back to Morning Glory. I'm Mike Graham, with you all the way through, of course, until 10 o'clock. Christopher says this: Mike, my background since '94 was in tech, and the companies I worked for then made many firsts, so I decided to investigate net zero with an advanced AI, asking the right questions and drilling down on the answers. The results are more shocking than you state, or I believe could even imagine. The green companies are not only making billions, but the system as presented and planned cannot be implemented, and even if it was, it would not work. There is certainly some corruption at the upper end, but when the contracts were examined, they were drawn up by morons and have glaring examples of inept design. Well, that doesn't surprise me at all. Not at all. And of course, it does rather amuse me that James's last voice note said that Ed Miliband's going to wake up one morning with a horse's head in his bed, and that's going to be the end of his career. But we shall see. Last night, there was a show on television, which I would recommend everybody watches. If you didn't see it last night on Channel 4, you can watch it again back on More 4, or whatever it's called, the Channel 4 app, as you would call it. Maggie Oliver was involved in it, of course, as well, former Detective Constable, Greater Manchester Police, and campaigner for the victims of grooming gangs and rape gangs. Maggie joins us right now. Maggie, very good morning to you.
Morning, Mike.
It was a fascinating documentary. I mean, we haven't heard anything from the Prime Minister on whether or not it should be shown in all schools, by the way, but I guess that's another story. Let's have a quick look at, I think this is the trailer for it.
Do you think about how many men might have actually abused you?
It's in the hundreds, but I just try not to go there.
This is the story of 5 women.
One day it was like 11 men that all done something to me. I told the police on numerous occasions, nothing ever got done.
A story I found out about nearly 30 years ago.
There they are, that's them, 3 cars.
The men used to pick us up from school, and the school teachers and the head teacher used to watch them.
They kept me in a flat for 2 days, where they took turns on me.
And were you there by yourself?
Yeah.
I mean, it's pretty harrowing stuff, Maggie, for this time of the morning, but it was extraordinary. And what a very powerful documentary. I don't think I've seen a more powerful one. Tell us a bit more about how it came to be.
Well, I've worked on it with my team at the Maggie Oliver Foundation for about over 2 years. But the 3 of the girls, actually, that you've just seen, Chantel, Jade and Steph, are girls that... Chantel and Steph I've known about for 20 years. Right. And so Anna, who's the documentary maker, she made a documentary back in 2003, just before I went on Augusta. So our journeys have paralleled each other. So that's my world. But they are 5 examples of thousands of children who have been failed by the system. And I think the power of that, I mean, Jade, that you're just looking at there, an easy way for describing it for people who didn't watch the documentary is that Jade could be Amber without somebody like me fighting their corner. Jade actually went to prison. Within the space of, a couple of weeks, she went from being a 15-year-old a highest risk on the child protection register to an offender because she was going with friends to be abused, and the authorities chose to prosecute her. And we have still not seen anybody held accountable for those monumental failures in high places. So, you know, these stories need to be told, need to be heard. They take a lot of time to pull together. It takes a lot of time for those victims to find their voices, to believe, Mike, that they have done nothing wrong. They were children. Chantel was in care from under the age of 11. She went through 47 care places in homes and moved around. It's just heartbreaking stuff, and it's really why I continue to bang this drum.
And when you hear them saying things like, you know, the teachers and the head teachers of the schools were watching as we were being taken away by these horrible men, and they kind of knew what was going on. I mean, you can see why there would be nowhere for them to go, because I mean, you can sort of understand the political corruption and maybe even the police corruption in these kind of stories, but surely the teachers ought to have done better.
I mean, to be honest, a lot of the cases I've worked on, the teachers and the schools did report to the police and social services. It was the police that were turning away and saying these kids were making a lifestyle choice. Steph in that programme, she's the only girl I met on Operation Augusta because she was just 18. She tells her harrowing story there of how she was abused by a police officer that she pointed out to me back in 2005. She's been revisited by the police in 2019 for the new case that's ongoing. 6 years on, Chantel and Steph have still not had any justice. That case is still open. Why is that police officer who was identified, who the police knew was abusing children, still out there? They're the big issues, Mike. It's not, you know, and these girls have shared their story because they want systemic change. They don't want this to happen to other children. So they are just a snapshot. They are examples of children who have grown up, who have acknowledged that they did nothing wrong. They want to see accountability at the top, and they are using their stories and their voices to share the truth of what they've endured. And you only have to see those few seconds of Jade to see that, you know, 20 years on, 10 years on from when she went to prison, and she is still severely traumatized. She can't even go on a school trip with her children because, having been prosecuted for being a madam or a child abuser when she was just 16, she was 15 when she was being abused, 14. It's harrowing, and the consequences last forever, actually.
Yeah, they do, and that's very clear. And you always say to me whenever we speak that it's still going on as well.
Mike, anybody who watched that programme last night, and I would recommend that you watch it, because we've talked a lot about this subject, and that can tell you far more than a few words from me ever will. But it talks about Operation Green Jacket. It talks about cases in Yorkshire. Today, Scarlett on that programme gives a very clear picture of what's been happening to her up until 2 years ago. So these things, you know, Marlon, who's her father, talks of how he's tried to get the police to act on his daughter's abuse, and it fell on deaf ears. They are examples of the cases that we see in the Maggie Oliver Foundation all the time. And it's not, sadly, Mike, it's not just victims of grooming gangs that are being failed. It's many, many victims of serious sexual crime, because our system is not fit for purpose. It's on its knees. It's broken. And that's where people's attention needs to go. I'd suggest that, you know, they perhaps just look at my Twitter to get a snapshot, to get a flavour of what's been said, and to see how they can help in helping us to bring change so that we don't get future generations of children like Jade that you're just looking at there.
I know. It's awful. I don't know whether you saw it yesterday, Prime Minister's Questions, but I don't know what you made of Keir Starmer's answer to Kemi Badenoch, who said, you know, why are we not hearing anything about these local inquiries? The Labour government saying they're not going to do a national inquiry because we've already had one. He doesn't seem to be interested at all in pushing this agenda.
You know, I think that there is room in this this scandal, this national scandal, for many people to go down different pathways. For me, I don't need an inquiry to tell me that the system is broken. I want those at the top to be held criminally accountable for gross neglect of duty. But all I see, another inquiry for me would be kicking the ball down the road. But I realise that victims want to be heard, want to have a voice. But what I would say, Mike, it's, you know, the Conservatives, the Labour, they're all equally negligent. You know, the Conservatives have been in office for many years, and I have been banging this drum for 10 years. They did nothing either. So I see empty words. The thing is, with an inquiry, what happens at the end of it? We've already had the National ICSA inquiry, which was a whitewash, but the 20 recommendations have still, 3 years later, not been implemented. I've issued pre-action protocol letter to the government. I'm going to take them to a judicial review. We want those implemented. Another inquiry with recommendations sitting on the shelf won't bring the change that we need. We need accountability, we need action, and we need consequences for chief police officers, for chief social workers who have failed in their duty, maybe even the Home Secretary, maybe even Keir Starmer. Let's see where the evidence leads us. Look at my Twitter for #TheyKnew. We are bringing a legal challenge to try and hold those at the top to account. It's barristers, lawyers who will be following the evidence. I think talking is done. We need action, and I would like to see those responsible for these failures, which I consider neglect of duty, Mike. I want to see them prosecuted and in prison. And I think we will see change then, which empty words and more talking just won't bring.
No, it's brilliant what you're doing, Maggie. Thank you so much for coming on and talking to us about it, and congratulations. It's a fantastic documentary. It really is. You should watch it. Maggie Oliver, thank you very much indeed, former Detective Chief Constable, and of course founder of the Maggie Oliver Foundation. It's coming up to just after 8 o'clock. We've got some news to come. We'll be back after that. Good evening and welcome to Plank of the Week, the one show where you do not have to be worried about judgmental people because we'll do all the judging for you. Let's just have a look at how Humsley Useless is now spending his time.
There goes your career, mate.
Over there a bit is over towards where all the migrants come in. He's jumping there. There he goes. He goes over the bar. Hello, and lady. Unfortunately, it catches on his Johnson.
If he's Plank of the Week, he's got a sizable plank.
That's a whole different show.
Plank of the Week, Fridays at 7 on Talk.
Hi, I'm Kevin O'Sullivan, and I've got a message for you.
Welcome back to this blockbuster edition of What Just Happened. It really is a good one, I think. It's so funny that people keep calling me...
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is...
Welcome to Morning Glory. It is coming up to just after 8 and it is a glorious morning. It's May Day, by the way, for those of you who remember what May Day was supposed to stand for. It was supposed to be Workers of the World United. We're going to talk to Peter Hitchens about that, columnist at the Mail on Sunday, of course. There was a time when it was a big sort of national holiday. There will be a bank holiday, of course, on Monday. It used to be a time when trade unionists would march around the cities of this country and declare themselves to be in solidarity with one thing or another, possibly a foreign conflict or possibly just in conflict with the government. That's all sort of disappeared, really, because, of course, a lot of people now wonder whatever happened to the great industry of this country that trade unions were kind of born in. The steel industry, for example, which is practically non-existent now. We've got a man in charge of British Steel who used to be a fake solicitor. You know, he's the Secretary of State for Business and Trade and Industry. But he doesn't know anything about steel. But don't worry, he's in charge of the company. He's also a senior member of the Cabinet. We've got Rachel Reeves in the Cabinet, apparently in trouble for breaching ministerial guidelines by not registering yet another freebie that she took to go and see something at the National Theatre. And we've got Keir Starmer refusing to answer questions about anything that he gets asked at Prime Minister's questions, refusing point blank to give any clue as to what the government is doing and why it's doing it. You've got net zero, a big row going on between Tony Blair, which I'm sure Peter Hitchens has got a view on, and Ed Miliband. Ed Miliband looks as though he's going to be thrown under a bus, very possibly by Keir Starmer, because they're very confused about what to do now. They don't know. Sort of, you know, great St Tony of Blair has said that it's doomed to failure, but now he says he doesn't mean it. He didn't mean it. Let's get a voice note from Polly on the NHS.
Hi Mike, it's Polly in Cheshire. I recently requested a copy of my medical records to find out that I'd been diagnosed in 2012 with a liver disease and nobody told me. So I'm just raising a complaint against the NHS now.
You think it might have been something they would mention to you, that you've got some kind of liver issue. We've got lots and lots of messages coming on this front because it turns out that a quarter of people who were surveyed recently have said that they've had some kind of error put into their medical records, and we've had plenty of you who have told us stories about how you got sent an appointment for something that you didn't have wrong with you. There's something going very, very wrong in the NHS. Talk about joined-up thinking. Absolutely nothing like that is happening. The housing market is slumped, by the way, thanks to the Rachel Reeves economy boost. She's, of course, decided it's a good idea to put stamp duty up for first-time buyers, so that's not worked out well. There's more cyber attacks hitting the shops. Marks and Spencer's earlier. Now the Co-op have been hit as well. We've got stories about why you have to put sun cream on your cat because it's so hot. And also, of course, we'll still talk about that Metropolitan Police gun officer who's facing the sack. This is Morning Glory. Let's get it on. I've got this from Nicky in York. I have a friend who was messed about with appointments by the NHS. 6 cancelled on the app. He ended up getting his diagnosis over the phone at work as he was desperate to know his results. It turned out he had prostate cancer. The urologist, who was very apologetic, said that unfortunately there were more administrative staff than medical staff and none of them knew what the other one was doing. Well, that's not very encouraging, is it, I'm afraid? Really, really bad. The way the NHS is going is just getting worse and worse and worse. Let's talk to Peter Hitchens. Very good morning to you, Peter.
Good morning, Mike.
And a happy May Day to you, if that's what we do. I don't remember if we used to wish each other a happy May Day or not, really.
I think a glorious May Day, wasn't it? It was the communist Easter.
Yes, it really was. I seem to remember sort of great swathes of trade unionists marching around Holborn, holding up big banners and, you know...
Well, those lovely old banners that came from the age of proper trade unionism that they used to carry around. They're all in museums now, but they used to come out on these occasions. Actually, the reason why it's all gone is because industry is gone, and therefore trade unions, as we used to know them, are gone. There are things called trade unions, but by and large, they're just lobbyists for public sector spending and left-wing causes, as opposed to being what I used to deal with, which, although they tended to be pretty wildly to the left, were still dedicated to the interests of their members, and that's all gone now. It almost completely vanished.
Right.
Very few survivors of it, but it's a different thing.
Well,
I also saw that the last Soviet May Day celebrations in Red Square, which had already by then, because communism was on its way out, degenerated into a ridiculous and rather pathetic display.
Yeah.
All this is gone. The left have changed their tactics and move and act in different ways.
Yes. What did you make of Tony Blair's intervention this week on net zero? I'm sort of slightly more interested in what's going on behind the scenes and what he actually said. And there seems to be a feud of some kind now inside of Downing Street between the eco-zealots on the one side and those who think that maybe a more pragmatic approach is better.
Well, let's hope so. I don't know. Whenever the Blair creature comes out and says something that I agree with, then it worries me very, very much indeed. Where have I gone wrong? I rush out and go and put sun cream on the cat to calm my nerves. But it is very odd. I don't know. I think there must be people. And long ago, the late Nigel Lawson said to the global warming people, look, you may be right, you may be wrong, but your approach of actually trying to strangle the economy to prevent this from happening is the wrong one, and it would be more sensible to look and see what actually happens and then take measures to ameliorate it. And I think there must now be people in the global warming religion who can see that this was actually sensible advice.
Yeah.
Maybe Blair is one of them, or it may be that now he's doing a bit of work for Saudi Arabia. Maybe he's formed a more liberal view on oil. I don't know what the explanation is, but it's quite plain that there's, as there so often is in revolutionary movements, there's dissent because it isn't working out quite as expected, and they must be able to see first of all, the economic danger, and secondly, what happened in Spain and Portugal the other day may well be, and I doubt whether we'll ever get to the bottom of it, evidence of a thing which has worried me for a long time, since we had a problem of this kind in 2019. If you rely very heavily on wind power, in particular, you lose a very important thing called inertia in the electricity transmission system, which makes it much more vulnerable to a sudden flip, which will send the whole thing spinning into blackouts. And we are very much in danger of that. And everybody who knows anything about electricity generation is aware of it. I think they must be, again, wondering, are we doing the right thing? And it's about time. Whether they will ever get around to grasping how wrong many of our actions have been, I don't know. And, of course, a lot of what they did is irreversible.
Yes.
Particularly not merely the closing, but I always stress this. This is extraordinary behavior. When we closed down our coal-fired power stations, which, of course, the Chinese are building at a rate of about 10 a week, we didn't mothball them and leave them ready in case we need them again. We blew them up.
Yeah.
So they're simply not there now if we need that kind of power generation. And we've done ourselves a lot of damage. If there's any recognition among the warmest fanatics that this is what they've done, then that has to be good. But let's wait and see how that works out.
Yeah, quite. Yeah, it's interesting, isn't it, that in the Spain and Portugal case, that as soon as it looked as though it might have something to do with net zero in terms of the rebuilding of the system and the grid and its resilience, suddenly we don't know what happened. You know, when they started, perhaps we'll never know. Whereas, of course, if it had been something related to the climate, which they tried to push on us for the first sort of 5 minutes of the scandal, where they said, it was some extreme weather event that caused it, they realised nobody was believing that one, so they sort of forgot about that and quietly didn't mention it again.
Well, it's funny, the whole thing is so dishonest. Until about 15, 20 years ago, intelligent people, even on the warmist side, would concede that there was very little actual hard evidence that so-called freak weather events were increasing in number, or that this was in any way connected with the warming, which is undoubtedly taking place. Then suddenly all restraint and consideration that kind was dropped. They just asserted it over and over again. If there was a hurricane, then it was caused by global warming. And if it suits them, then there's almost nothing they won't say. It's in my view, a terribly unfair and unpleasant debate in which it's very, very hard to have a rational discussion one side to another, which is always a sign, of course, that zealots are abroad.
Yeah. Absolutely right. And everything is sort of permeated upon the fact that you'll save money in the future. And you kind of go, right, OK, then. I mean, I was quoting this earlier, £2.5 million of taxpayers' money spent just a couple of weeks ago putting solar panels on the roofs of some schools. And Sadiq Khan and Ed Miliband were very happily parading themselves on the roofs of these schools, saying this is going to be so great because the energy prices will come down. And you're kind of going, so it's not really investment. You've actually spent taxpayers' money for no return. And I said, if you went to a bank with that as a business plan, saying that, you know, in about 5 or possibly 10, maybe 20 years' time, your electricity bill might be slightly lower, they wouldn't lend you any money.
Well, I know. And as I repeatedly say, if this country and its government were a person, it would long ago have been sectioned for delusions of grandeur and various other mental problems, which an individual wouldn't be allowed to display for long without somebody saying, we've got to get this guy out of circulation.
Yeah.
He's not just harming himself, but harming other people. But because it's a government and a country, none of these things happen. So we carry on behaving in these crazy ways, and there's nothing to stop it. And because we haven't really got any serious opposition parties which have anything interesting to say, there is no chance of it being removed.
No, quite. I mean, I had a great message earlier from a Norwegian a listener who's actually in this country, because the Norwegian, you'll have seen on the front page of the Telegraph, the Norwegian energy minister has been visiting Britain and said you should never turn your back on oil. And he said there's an old Norwegian saying which says never borrow money if you have gold bars underneath the bed. And he said effectively what Britain is doing is borrowing money to basically spend on buying oil from Norway, who are drilling and refining it out of our own sea.
It is an astonishing piece of dogmatic misgovernment of the kind which happens when the people who are running your government are actually completely in the grip, say, of ideology rather than of reason.
Yeah.
And that is undoubtedly what we have, and it is very reminiscent of the Soviet system, which collapsed under the strain of its own contradictions in 1990. The reason why it collapsed was at least partly because of things like that. It was just behaving in mad ways. Yeah. I always remember Mikhail Gorbachev pointing out that farmers, pig farmers in the Soviet Union, would go to their local bakers to buy bread to feed to their pigs because it was cheaper than swill. because the price of bread had to be by law subsidized. It was so low that it was cheaper to buy bread from bakers than to actually well, this is the distortion which happens when your government is run by dogmatists, and this kind of thing, crazy things, will happen all the time.
Yeah.
And eventually you just run out of money to keep this fantasy going, and it all falls down a great inflated...
Well, Rachel Reeves now appears to be borrowing money to pay interest on previously borrowed money.
That's right. That's what we are doing. And if any individual were doing that, again, the people would say, have you gone completely out of your mind?
Yeah.
But the government can do it, and nobody says so. And there are just so many ways in which you can see the state of things leading to, I think probably the ultimate end of it must be really quite severe inflation, which because wipes out the debts, but also wipes out everybody's savings and wipes out the economy and probably brings an end to the strength of the currency, so making it very difficult for us to import things we're used to buying at reasonable prices.
Yeah.
And that's the crisis which I greatly fear, when it all concentrates in one thing, and it concentrates in what will ultimately be a collapse of the currency. It worries me. The more I see people just carrying on as if nothing was wrong, the more I think this will eventually just end in the most terrifying crisis.
Yeah, just sort of collapsing on itself. It's a shocking thing to think about.
That's what happened with the Soviet system. It carried on saying, yes, we've got a health service, yes, we've got a vast nuclear arsenal, yes, we've got a huge army, yes, we've got all these to build all these houses, yes, the price of bread is frozen at threepence a loaf. And then, bang, it all fell down in a great cloud of rust, and at the end of it, there was almost nothing left.
Yeah, crikey. That's about as gloomy a forecast as I've ever heard, I think, Peter. But listen, good to talk to you. Enjoy the rest of your May Day. Apparently there's at 2:30 p.m, there's a rally in Trafalgar Square with some trade union leaders. You've got the Teachers Union and the Palestinian ambassador there. So now you know what a great day out that will be. Peter Hitchens there making perfect sense, but making us all feel slightly gloomy about what's coming. Let's get a voice note from Darren.
Good morning, Mike. It's Darren here from Carmarthen. Hope you're well. Just been listening to your interview with Dr. Dean, Mike, where you've been talking about how splintered the service is in England regarding the NHS app and the different ways to access medical records between doctors and hospitals, etc. But you actually got it quite good in England, Mike, because we don't have access to the NHS app in Wales at all. So, yeah, I have no idea where all our billions of pounds are going, Mike.
It's unbelievable, isn't it? I don't think they can get it in Scotland either. I think we heard that the other day. Our local hospital, says Karen in Southampton, the University Hospital Southampton has their own system that patients sign up to. They can then access all the clinic letters and investigations they've had, such as scans and bloods. No access request needed. Well, that's good if you happen to live in Southampton. But I guess if you don't happen to live in Southampton, it's not so good. Maybe other hospitals are doing it, which would surely make sense. But wouldn't it make more sense if the whole NHS system was able to track what you had and where you'd been and what you'd got as a part of your medical records? Dan in Hampshire says, morning, Mike. Watched a show on surgeons in Cardiff last night. Amazing people, but they constantly had to cancel scheduled surgeries because urgent patients came in. When will this ridiculous NHS management realise they have to plan to allow space in the system for scheduled and emergency treatment? What sort of moronic health system plans to constantly work on the theory that the hospital should always be completely full? A high school student can even realise that there has to be room for higher loads at times, surely. Well, yeah, but of course we heard the other side of that the other day, didn't we, when we had the caller who said that basically his wife was taken into hospital, needed an MRI scan, but they couldn't give her an MRI scan because she wasn't an emergency, even though she'd been admitted to hospital. And so every time when they didn't have enough bandwidth to do it during the day, he would say to them, well, can't you do it as an emergency at night? No, I can't do it as an emergency. It's not an emergency. I mean, she could still be in hospital for all I know. If you're listening and you did manage to go away on holiday, let us know. But if you're still waiting, I'd love to know as well. It's 21 minutes past 8. Coming up, we're going to talk about the firearms officer who's now going to be done for serious misconduct, gross misconduct, even though he was cleared of murdering Chris Cabba earlier this year. This is Talk.
I think particularly in the high security prisons, the category A jails like Frankland and Belmarsh, is that the Islamist prisoners in some parts of those jails have sort of in effect taken control of wings, and there is a large influx as well of Muslim prisoners who are in some cases sort of coerced or intimidated into joining these gangs. And it's having a serious effect, I think, on order and control.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Welcome back to Morning Glory. It's 8:24. I'm Mike Graham. Les in Cheshire says this. I recently asked my GP for a copy of my medical records under a request form, and all appointments and hospital appointments were included in the 85-page printout. So I don't know what your last guest was talking about. Great show. Well, I mean, he's a doctor. He was saying that he can only provide the from his own surgery a doctor's the GP records that he's got. He doesn't have any other records apart from anything to do with the GP surgery. Dr. Eggett says you can go to the NHS app and you can get your medical records. No, you cannot, says Richie in Mid-Sussex. I'm on the NHS app and it doesn't show you medical records. I've checked many times. So there's a lot of confusion going on here. A lot of people seemingly having different stories. Certainly it's not available in Wales. Don't think it's available in Scotland. And some parts of the country appear to have different rules and regulations than we do. Once again, your celebrity GP is wrong. You can access your record GP in the NHS app, not your medical record. It doesn't include everything, only NHS services. Well, I think that's what he said, isn't it? He said you can only, if you go into the NHS app, you can get your GP records. That's what he said. I moved for a house from Scotland to England 5 years ago. NHS Scotland wouldn't transfer my GP records to my new GP in England. The benefits of devolution. Yeah, that's not very helpful. Yeah, I mean, when I lived in Scotland, moved from Glasgow to Edinburgh, and my children's medical records were supposed to be transferred from one hospital to another, and they got lost in transit. So, you know, 25 minutes past 8. Let's talk about the big story of the week here. Tony Long, former Metropolitan Police firearms officer, author of Lethal Force, My Life as the Met's Most Controversial Marksman. The big story, of course, of the week in police matters, really, is Sergeant Martin Blake, who shot dead Chris Camber in Streatham, September 2022. You remember that he was cleared of murder rather quickly by a court. Now it looks as though he's going to face a gross misconduct disciplinary hearing, and there's word that he might even lose his job. Tony, very good morning to you.
Good morning, Mike. How are you?
Yeah, very well. This is a very curious development. I've been listening to a lot of people talking about it over the last kind of 12 hours, 24 hours, I guess, since the announcement came out. And it seems as though the IOPC are operating sort of almost as sort of judge and jury here, aren't they?
Yeah, I mean, when you said curious, I mean, anything to do with the IOPC, in my opinion, is curious. Yeah. I just see the whole thing as cruel and vindictive. You would think, wouldn't you, as you hinted at there, that when a jury comes back within 15 minutes with a not guilty plea and sends a letter to the judge saying, why was this officer even charged, and what were the CPS and the IOPC thinking, that they'd still be nursing their bloody nose and just put this down to experience. I mean, this is ridiculous. I mean, to give you an idea how cruel it is, I was acquitted of murder in a very similar situation, a vehicle stop that was in 2005. I'd been retired by 8 years when I went to the Old Bailey, and it was 10 years after the event that I was acquitted. During that same year, 2015, a former colleague of mine, a friend of mine, Whiskey 80, was involved in another vehicle-related shooting incident against an organised crime group who were conspiring to release prisoners at gunpoint. He is still awaiting his gross misconduct hearing. He's never been charged with anything. There's been public inquiries. So 10 years is what Martin could be looking at waiting for this. So this, he's got a family. It's not just him. Yeah. The other thing that's worth bearing in mind, for not so much for Martin's case, but he'll be police officers that are suspended and awaiting this type of inquiry are invariably put on duties where they're on a flat rate of pay. Well, police officers, so London's an expensive place to live. Without being mercenary, a good percentage of police officers rely on the overtime that they earn from doing these armed operations and going out at all hours of the day and night to supplement their pay. You've got mortgages to pay, and you're on a flat rate of pay for 10 years. while they pull their finger out is ridiculous.
It is ridiculous. And I mean, are you doing any kind of work at all if you're suspended in that way?
Well, yes, you are. I mean, certainly in the firearms unit, there's a thing that tends to happen that people, guys and girls, wear various hats. So a good percentage will be instructors. So when they're taken off of operational roles, they will then be deployed to train other officers in the use of firearms.
Right. And in your case, and in Martin's case, I mean, you obviously would have, I presume you would have some kind of representation from the Police Federation or something like that. But
yeah, I mean, again,
you're still pretty helpless, aren't you?
Well, that's an issue in itself, because of course a lot of people, because of the the pension being messed around and everything else, there's more than a few young officers that don't sign up for the Police Federation.
Right.
So, you're talking about, £900,000 bills.
Yeah.
For legal fees.
Because you have to pay for your own lawyers.
Well, you would have to if you weren't with the Federation. I mean,
Yeah.
I joined in the 1970s where, I was 18 years of age and they just said sign here, and I did. And that was it. I was a member of the Federation.
Right.
But I'm very glad that I did, because, there's, you can imagine being retired and then finding yourself facing a murder trial at the Old Bailey.
Absolutely. And of course the other issue, which is an older issue about Martin, is that, there was no real reason for his name to be published, but it became public knowledge because a judge ruled that could happen.
Well, look, yes, and of course there was such an outcry about it that Yvette Cooper is actually bringing in legislation so that there will be an assumption of innocence. Sorry, not an assumption, an assumption of anonymity.
Yeah.
For police officers when they get involved in firearms situations. But what happens to an ordinary regular Bobby on the beat when he gets in a fight with a suspect, and the suspect subsequently dies, and then he gets charged, for using his bare hands or a baton or a taser or CS? It seems very piecemeal to me. I mean, I think the whole system needs reviewing, but in particular the IOPC. It simply isn't fit for purpose.
Yeah. And who's really in charge of that? I mean, do we know?
In charge of what? The IOPC?
Of the IOPC, yeah.
Well, I don't know. And here's an interesting thing. The last time I looked, it might have changed, but there was no means of complaining against the IOPC.
Right. So it's a bit like the parole board. You never get to find out who's on it.
Well, kind of, yeah, exactly. But the other interesting thing about the IOPC is if you asked any police officer in the country of any rank what they thought of the IOPC, it'd be pretty well verbatim what I've just said to you. Yeah. But actually, there are communities, and specifically, the black community, many of whom feel that the IOPC has failed them.
Right.
Because they have failed to successfully prosecute a police officer for shooting a young black man.
Yeah.
And, so they're proper piggy in the middle, the IOPC. They're hated by the police who they're investigating. They're hated by the members of the black community who think they're not doing a good job. And so I see this as like the ultimate virtue signalling. We failed to prosecute him for a criminal offence with a lesser burden of proof, or sorry, a higher burden of proof. Let's now do him under his discipline code, so that we can turn around and say, see, oh well, look, we got you some compensation. We got the officer in trouble. He's lost his job. Look at us. How good are we?
Yeah, incredible. And I mean, I don't understand quite how you can call a police officer who is hired to use a firearm when required, uses that firearm because there was lethal force probably being used against him, technically speaking, with a guy trying to ram a car into him and trying to escape from police custody, and he does his job. How is that in any way, shape or form gross misconduct?
Well, I don't know, because there were expert witnesses, some of whom were like police firearms experts, who said that he acted absolutely in accordance with his training. So the only thing I can think of is that there's some administrative question over the interviews. I really don't know. I mean, that's the other thing. I mean, we're not going to know until 10 years' time when there's a public inquiry.
Yeah.
And you and I'll probably be back here going, what was that about?
Right, exactly right. And his career will meanwhile be ruined. It's an absolutely shocking state of affairs. Tony, good to talk to you. Thanks very much indeed. Tony Long, former Metropolitan Police firearms officer, and also the author of a book called Lethal Force, My Life as the Met's Most Controversial Marksman. It's quite shocking what they're doing to this police officer. It really is. I can't see the reasoning for it. I can't see any possible reasoning for it other than vindictiveness and a need to kind of virtue signal, as Tony said, to the black community. Vicky says this: my partner's mum has received an appointment in Leeds for an eye appointment. The letter has come to her home in Poole in Dorset. We tried to cancel that appointment, but they sent another one for Leeds. We then finally received her appointment for Bournemouth Eye Hospital for the 10th of May, and they've cancelled it and rescheduled it for the 19th of May. We'll see if that gets cancelled. Yeah, I'd say it's odds on that it will get cancelled. Absolutely right. One here from Sam, who says, Mayday. Morning, Mike. Mayday always reminds me of the famous Tony Hancock's half-hour episode called The Radio Ham, when the one person calling Mayday, Mayday over the radio, and Hancock says, Mayday? That was last month. It's June now. Yeah, I remember that as well. Very good. It's 8:34. Coming next, what are we doing? We're going to be talking to Andrew Montford, Net Zero Watch. He'll have a thing or two to say about the feud currently splitting Downing Street right in half.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Welcome back to Morning Glory. I'm Mike Graham. It's 8:36. This from Paul in Hitchin. Morning, Mike. Reference to the NHS not knowing its backside from its elbow. My wife used to work for the NHS, and one particular doctor she was associated with complained that his 3-day-a-week secretary was not sending out letters in good time for follow-up appointments. Of course, secretary complains to the higher-ups about bullying, so guess who the higher-ups put pressure on to resign and leave? Brilliant. The NHS lost a passionate doctor because he wanted something done properly. This is why my wife left. There is so much dead wood inside the NHS. Well, obviously, right. And Tony from Barrow in Furness says, Mike, on the migrant of the day having PTSD as a result of having COVID ruled on by a judge, will this result in PIP claims going up for having COVID? Well, I wouldn't be surprised. I wouldn't be at all surprised. Let's talk some more about net zero, though. First, though, a quick voice note from Damon.
Morning, Mike. Damon from Wigan. Just a horror story for you. Years ago, 1997, my granddad died of a massive heart attack. And it was completely out of the blue. He'd been suffering for years with emphysema. 8 weeks after he died, my nan got a phone call to say that he was being sent for a scan on his heart, which my nan said, you're too late, he's passed away. Right. When we was checking back through his medical records, in 1996, the beginning of 1996, he'd been for some tests, and it was found out that his left ventricle was completely blocked. But they never told me granddad or anybody else, because the doctors said he had enough to cope with his emphysema. So until he died, we didn't even know he'd had a blocked ventricle. And that was in 1997. So it just shows you how bad it was then and how worse it's got now. Cheers, Mike. Have a nice day.
That's ridiculous, isn't it? One story after another about the NHS. It's getting worse. I mean, every day we come in and think, well, we can't get any more stories out of the NHS, and every day we get more. Extraordinary. Let's talk to Andrew Montfort, Director of Net Zero Watch, though, because it would appear, Andrew, that the net zero story is still got some way to go. It looks like, to me anyway, very good morning to you, there's a massive feud going on inside of the powers that be inside of Downing Street. You know, you've got sort of Ed Miliband and his band on one hand, and then you've got the sort of pragmatists, if you like, perhaps led by the Tony Blairites, who are all trying to stop it from happening.
Morning, Mike. Yeah, that's very much my impression, that there is a division in the Labour Party.
Yeah.
Ed Miliband, as we've said before, is a fanatic, and he really wants to continue down the net zero road, regardless of the costs or the impact on the economy or society. But there are some rather more realistic people, or people who have become more realistic, perhaps, who are really wondering whether we can continue like this. I mean, the bad economic news keeps coming. We've had there's a major pottery in the Midlands has gone bust just yesterday. We've had Grangemouth closing. There's been no growth really in the UK economy since we signed up to the Climate Change Act in 2008. So it's a very bad situation, and I think there are people now in Labour who are going, we are going to have to change direction. So this thing with Tony Blair speaking out about it and saying that something needs to change, I think is quite important. It may be that this is giving Keir Starmer a little bit of room to change direction. I'm not sure, though. It may just be that he's saying we need to do net zero, but to do it differently, which I think would be a mistake. You read the rest of the report. Blair's remarks came in a foreword to a report that his institute had produced. You actually read the body of the report, and it's still full of the usual sort of alarmist, we're all going to die in a climate fireball kind of stuff.
Yeah. But this is the thing. I mean, and also what we know, for example, after that climate summit they had, energy summit the other day, there's some kind of net zero Euro plan, which we're going to sign up to, which will include, I think, Britain getting on a sort of collision course with Donald Trump, because we'll be signing up again to the Paris Accords.
Yeah, I mean, this is all very disturbing, isn't it? And there's also the concern that as soon as the local elections are done, Keir Starmer is going to sign us up to the EU emissions trading scheme. At the moment, we have our own emissions trading scheme, which the major advantage of, if you can imagine such a thing in an emissions trading scheme, it's a bit cheaper than the EU one.
Right.
So what will happen is if we sign up to the EU one, we are going to suddenly get an increase in our energy bills. And, that at the moment is going to be an absolute disaster. We really can't afford any more price increases. But Starmer appears to be being pushed in this direction. So, I guess the pragmatists don't have the upper hand as yet. I certainly think Labour is quite they are divided, and from what I hear, the new intake of MPs are very green. So it may be that Starmer actually feels a bit exposed here and doesn't feel that he can go too far too fast.
Yes, although the unions are out and about this morning on May Day, the Unite Union certainly saying, there's no job prospects coming here. All of this nonsense that Starmer talks about, 600,000 jobs being created, they haven't created one yet.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, the unions, I think, are going to be quite helpful to the cause, if you like, of putting the UK back on a more realistic energy path.
Yeah.
As you say, we've had Unite speaking out about it just today. Earlier in the week, the GMB were also speaking out. So I think this is extremely important, because obviously they put a lot of money the way of the Labour Party. And, if there is a threat that might dry up if they don't start behaving more sensibly, then I think that will concentrate minds in the Labour hierarchy. But, I think overall, I would still be concerned that even if they do change now, is it just too late? That it's going to take so long to fix the energy mess we're in, that, the rest of our manufacturing base will be gone. I mean, essentially, the unions should have spoken up 10 years ago.
Yes, exactly right. I mean, I was reading a story this morning about a firm in the sort of potteries district around Stoke-on-Trent, which has had to shut down today simply and purely because they can't afford to run the factory anymore because the energy prices are so sky high that they've literally, run the risk of going under. I'll just try and find the tweet and see if I can find out. Here it is. Stoke-on-Trent's world-famous Moorcroft pottery firm has gone bust. In a place called Burslem, citing sky-high energy prices for firing its ceramic products and Labour's national insurance hike. So it's another victory for Rachel Thieves, by the looks of it.
Yeah, absolutely. And this is the problem for manufacturing. It's a double whammy, for all of them. It's the energy and it's the national insurance. And so, yeah. And if it gets worse, the energy prices look like they're going to get worse over the next few years.
Yeah.
Then what hope do they have? If you were running a pottery, you'd probably just go, let's shut up shop now.
Yeah, exactly. Because the prices are so ridiculous. We've got the same problem in Scunthorpe with British Steel, haven't we? I mean, they really can't afford to actually run a blast furnace, even though the company's now been rescued by the taxpayer and by Jonathan Reynolds, who's now in charge of it. But they've got no way of knowing how to actually run the business with the cost that it is going to cost them every single day.
That's right. I mean, just because you've changed the ownership doesn't mean that your costs are going to change.
No.
And of course, Labour are saying we're going to transition to electric arc furnaces, which is crazy. I mean, we have the most expensive electricity in the Western world.
Yeah.
Those prices are going to go up. So the idea that we're going to have a viable steel industry running on electricity is I mean, it's insane. It's completely unreal. And of course, this is the problem: is that Ed Miliband doesn't think rationally about this. He just thinks he's got net zero, and so we will get these crazy ideas, and if they ever try them, they will crash and burn.
Yeah, I'm afraid that looks like what we're going to be doing to the economy anyway, with the business killer, Rachel Reeves. Andrew, very good to talk to you. Thank you very much indeed, Andrew Montford, the Director of Net Zero Watch. Here's one from Edmund. He says, Mike, I was sent a diagnosis for a degenerative neurological condition by post over 3 years ago. I had my first neurologist appointment last week, 3 years after the letter. No healthcare professional has explained this condition to me. It's really scary. Yeah, I bet it is. James on May Day.
Hi, Mike. James in Wakefield here. So, May Day. Palestinian ambassador and trade union march in London. I think I'd rather have a bout of warts.
It is ridiculous, isn't it? Here's one from Brian. He says, Mike, I watched PMQs on Wednesday. What a farce it was. It was more like a courtroom. Starmer blatantly avoiding answering any questions put to him. But what do you expect? He was a public prosecutor and human rights lawyer. One thing he ain't is a politician. But why doesn't Lindsay Hoyle, the Speaker, do his job and insist the Prime Minister answers the questions? Is he too preoccupied planning his next five-star jolly? Yeah, probably. Our Parliament is not fit for purpose. I'd have to agree. Coming up, we'll speak to somebody in the Scottish Parliament, Ash Regan.
Hi, I'm Kevin O'Sullivan, and I've got a message for you. Welcome back to this blockbuster edition of What Just Happened. It really is a good one, I think. It's so funny that people keep calling me Meghan Markle, because it's Meghan Sussex now.
Flynn has said, Samara, I agree with you all the time, but you're just boring.
I refuse to work for ITV ever again. Oh! What Just Happened? Fridays at 9 on Talk.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Welcome back to Morning Glory, 8:49. We're here, of course, for another hour and a bit. Julie Hartley-Brewer here at 10 o'clock, of course. Coming up, we're going to speak to Ash Regan, MSP for Edinburgh Eastern from the Alipur Party. Let's first of all get a voice note from Adrian.
Morning, Mike. It's Adrian from Heathfield. Great show as always. Nick is absolutely right about the efficiency of solar panels. As they get dirty, the efficiency drops. Same thing happens with wind turbines and erosion of the blades. Solar panels, far more worrying though. I'm a fire risk consultant, and there have been notable fires caused by hotspots in the panels. A solar panel is a printed circuit sandwiched by 2 layers of ethylene vinyl acetate, basically flammable resin. So if you get debris or leaves or bird droppings, it can cause a hotspot, and that can cause a fire. And then once that fire starts, that resin loves to burn. Anyway, food for thought. Everyone have a good morning. Bye.
Adrian, very interesting information that, and very useful, because yeah, if you cover your roof with these things and they go on fire, that's not great, is it? The house is going to burn down. And like electrical fires, no doubt, like electric cars, once they take hold, you can't put them out. They're really toxic as well. So what a great idea that the government's got on the front page of the Times today to put solar panels on all new homes. You better put a couple of fire extinguishers in them as well while you're at it. This from Pete in Southend. My GP surgery rang me this week to ask if I needed anything. They were reaching out to older people who hadn't used the surgery much. They rang again and gave me a doctor's appointment on the phone to sort out a prescription they'd messed up on. Well, that's good, isn't it? Steve from Church Stretton says, for me, the NHS app does not work. I'm 70 years old, and according to the app, I've only had one illness, which was last year. Poor info is worse than none. Well, yeah, absolutely right. Just before we talk to Ash Regan, let's have a look at who's back. Guess who's back? Yep, it's Kamala Harris.
In fact, please allow me, friends, to digress for a moment. Okay. It's kind of dark in here, but I'm asking for a show of hands. Who saw that video from a couple of weeks ago, the one of the elephants at the San Diego Zoo during the earthquake? Google it if you've not seen it. So that scene has been on my mind. Everybody's asking me what you've been thinking about these days. Well,
dear me. I don't think she's going to come back anytime soon, is she, for heaven's sake? Ash Regan is here. Ash Regan, good morning to you.
Good morning. How are you?
Not bad at all. Good to talk to you. It sounds like to me, I think I'm right in saying you don't have the NHS app in Scotland that we have in England, do you?
No.
Oh, it doesn't work. Do you have one? Is there one at all or not? There's no NHS Scotland app.
Not that I've used. I usually just, I'm quite old-fashioned. I usually just phone up the surgery in the morning if I need an appointment.
Right. No, absolutely. No, it's just because it's happened to come up today that there's been a lot of errors being made in people's sort of medical records, and people can't really quite understand it. But let's go back to something that happened a little while ago, the fallout as well from the Supreme Court ruling about what a woman is, which seems to confuse an awful lot of people, not least the NHS again.
Yes, I mean, it was big news. Not just in Scotland, I guess, but across the UK, when there's 3 I'm sort of calling them ordinary Scottish mums, but I guess I think it'd be further from the truth, really, of campaigners that really took on the Scottish government over this issue and fought them all the way to the Supreme Court and won. I mean, it's extraordinary time. I was in the room in Edinburgh where we were watching a live link with the Supreme Court. And I think I preferred to be there because they'd been warned at the Supreme Court they weren't allowed to react. They had to just sit there really quietly. Right. Whereas you'll have seen the scenes in Edinburgh, people, were crying and celebrating and so on. So it was a big deal. And we really felt like, I mean, in some ways, it shouldn't have ever come to this. We shouldn't have had to have wasted so much time, energy and money to really get back to where we started. I mean, it seems pretty obvious that the definition of men and women would be based on the biological definition. Well, so it's crazy that we've got here. But we thought, I suppose we probably shouldn't be this naive now, that this would somehow galvanise the Scottish government, that they would hold up their hands and say, OK, we apologise, we got this wrong and we're going to fix it. Yeah. Of course, that's not what's happened. So the government have set out, really, they're using the EHRC as a deflector shield at the moment. Yeah. They can't do anything until they're the regulator of the law in this area, that they can't do anything until they get advanced guidance from them. Yeah. But they don't need to wait for that. And really, what's the point of having a government if they're not going to govern? Yes. What are they waiting for here? And, another thing that struck me recently is that obviously I was in that government, for quite a few years, and I resigned over this issue. Right. Because I just was not going to be in a position that I was going to vote for something that I thought was going to be damaging for, women and girls and their rights and their, dignity and safety. And yet the Scottish government have been humiliated, roundly defeated in the highest court in the land. And no one has taken any accountability for that. Nobody's resigned. Nobody's apologised. It's quite astonishing, really, that we're at this point in public life where nobody takes accountability for anything. It's shocking. It is shocking. And Nicola Sturgeon's been very quiet, hasn't she? I don't think she said anything at all. But even Labour in Westminster, you can see Keir Starmer's very uncomfortable still just even talking about it. And he couldn't bring himself to actually say the words, a trans woman is not a woman. He still hasn't said it. Instead he gave this ridiculous, mealy-mouthed nonsense at Prime Minister's questions and on television that, it gives us some very welcome clarity and we can now adjust the guidance going forward and all this kind of, robotic type speak. Instead of saying, as you said, just admit that you got it wrong before because you did. You thought that a trans woman was in fact a woman. It now turns out in law that that's not the case. But you can still be nuanced about it and say nobody's trying to prejudice anybody or discriminate against anybody who wants to live a life in the way that they want to live it. It's just that women's rights, I'm afraid, outstrip trans rights at this point. Well, it's been balanced. What was happening was that trans rights were going above everybody else's rights. And all that's happened is it's just rebalanced so that everybody's rights are on the same level, which is as it should be. And I think that politicians that are not able to recognise that, and also the other thing that came from the Scottish Government was that they weren't acknowledging at any point that, women really had felt that their rights, as we were just saying, were on the line, that their rights were being removed. There's been a number of court cases up and down the country where women had been suspended from their jobs for complaining. We had that famous one quite recently, which is the Sandy Peggy case, where somebody that had a very long service had been suspended from their job just for saying that they were uncomfortable sharing a changing room with somebody of the opposite sex. Right. There was no kind of recognition of the fact that women, had really felt like their rights were on the line. No one has been able to go there. And I think in terms of, we talk a lot these days about trust in politics, don't we? And about how the public are sort of turned off to politicians and some of the way that they speak. But this would be a good start because I think there's a lot of people out there that think that politicians have been gaslighting them for the last few years with all this wokeisms. Right. It would be a good start for the politicians to say and use plain language and just say, look, we got this wrong and we're going to move on from it. We've got other issues up here now. We've got Maggie Chapman. So she's in the Scottish Green Party. Yes. And so she was at a protest just after the Supreme Court ruling, where she was, it's on video, so we have. Yeah, I've seen it. Yeah, saying that the Supreme Court was, demonstrating bigotry, hatred, prejudice, etc. So that did cause, a bit of a stooshy, as we would say up here. But I think there's a wider issue here. So she sits on she's a deputy convener of a very important committee in Holyrood. So it's the Qualities and Human Rights Committee. And that is a committee that For Women Scotland, which is the group we were talking about that won at the Supreme Court, would probably be asked to attend, to give evidence, you know, to talk about things, would be giving evidence in certain inquiries and so on. They've said they won't attend that committee if Maggie Chapman is still on there. So we've got an issue there. But she managed to survive a vote to remove her a couple of days ago, but she did actually vote for herself. So it's, again, we've got a situation where that committee also presided over the Gender Recognition Reform Bill, which was also obviously struck down. And the same people are on that committee. So I think that the people that are on that committee, you know, would say, oh, we've scrutinised things and we, you know, they've got this wrong over and over and over again, and they need to go.
Yeah, they really do. And she tries to sort of weasel herself out of it, didn't she, by saying, oh, she wasn't talking about the court, she was talking about some of the people that have said some of the things. And it was like, we know exactly what you were doing. It was very clear what she was doing. And unfortunately, a lot of these extremists, and I'm going to call them that because that's what they are never going to change their mind. And they don't care about the law. And maybe some of them just need to be arrested and charged with something so that they finally get it, you know?
Yeah, I agree with that. I think that, you know, certainly what we've seen from members of the Green Party, I would say is quite extremist ideology that they're talking about. And also the way they've been allowed to talk about these things. And it has emboldened them because, you know, you get away with something and then you go a little bit further and a little bit further and a little bit further. I believe now she has gone too far and there needs to be some kind of consequence.
And they need to rein it in. Yeah, absolutely right. Ash, we've got to run. Thank you very much indeed for your time. Good to see you. Ash Regan, MSP for Edinburgh Eastern from the Alipur Party. We've got loads more coming up after the news.
Is it transphobic to say only women have a cervix?
Well, it is something that shouldn't be said. It is not right. A woman is an adult female, and the court has made that absolutely clear. I actually welcome the judgment because I think it gives real clarity. It allows those that have got to draw up guidance to be really clear about what that guidance should say. If you want to fight for Remain, vote Labour. Now, there are some who say we don't need Brexit to work. We need to reverse it. I couldn't disagree more. Day after day, there are new allegations of sleaze, of favours, of privileged access. And it's all very well the Prime Minister saying, well, say now, well, I'm paying for it.
You've decided to repay £6,000 worth of gifts.
Lord Ali is facing an investigation. I wonder how concerned you are that your biggest donor was not fully transparent.
Are you saying you made a mistake?
It was right for me to make those repayments. Thank you. Of course, I wouldn't want Donald Trump round for dinner, but don't underestimate the danger to the world if Trump is re-elected this time around. I'm anti-Trump. I would like to send my warmest congratulations to President Trump on his inauguration as the 47th President of the United States.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Welcome back to Morning Glory. It's coming up to nearly 3 minutes past 9, and we are here, of course, until 10 o'clock. It's Morning Glory, and it is a glorious morning. It's May Day, in fact, a glorious May Day morning. And if you feel enamoured enough with the idea of celebrating Workers of the World Uniting, you can pop along to Trafalgar Square this afternoon here in London at 2:30, where you'll be able to hear speakers from the Unite Union, the RMT, the Teachers Union, and, wait for it, the UK Ambassador to Palestine, from Palestine, Dr. Hussein Zomlot. I don't know what that's got to do with May Day, but there we are. I'm sure he's got some very, very valid points to make about Palestinian freedoms and all the rest of it. Meanwhile, the rest of us are working and, of course, having to pay tax and having to find some way of making it through what is becoming a more and more ludicrous situation created by this more and more ridiculous government that we have, I'm afraid, in this country. One here from Tina, who says, I'm not confused, Mike. I don't want a smart meter, I don't want solar panels, and I don't want an electric car. Stop bloody telling me what to do. I'm working 60 hours a week and trying to survive. I feel your pain, Tina. I know exactly how you feel. People don't want electric cars. Tony Blair said people should not be forced into making decisions that might change their lives or make their lives more difficult or make their lives more expensive. People don't want heat pumps. People don't want solar panels. We just heard from a solar panel expert, a fire safety expert, that they can spontaneously combust and go up in flames. Well, that's not much good if they're on the roof of your house, really, is it? Or indeed in the field next door. We talk about the war going on between the various factions inside government at the moment over net zero, because, of course, on the front page of the Times, they're saying all new houses will have solar panels on them. Meanwhile, the unions are against it. The unions are saying it's not good. We'll talk as well about the Metropolitan Police officer, firearms officer, who's now facing a gross misconduct charge after being cleared of the murder of Chris Cabba. We'll also find out why Rachel Reeves is being probed by yet another sleaze watchdog. There seems to be no end to her talents in picking up freebies. And what about the change in courts procedures, where apparently the words "all rise," which used to be made by the judge or just by the person before the judge came in, it now is going to say something like "all rise if you can." Huh? Well, what do you mean if you can? I mean, I know what they mean, but, you know, it's ridiculous, isn't it? It's 5 minutes past 9. This is Morning Glory. Let's get it on. Ian says this: my 13-year-old school doesn't put the heating on in winter, so they have lessons sat in their coats. Brilliant. I live in a little village in West Norfolk. We regularly have mini power cuts, says Sonia. In fact, one day, within 2 hours, we had 3. Crikey. I mean, I wonder if you're not connected properly up to the national grid. Maybe there's just some bloke in a shed on a bicycle and a generator, something like that. Mike, how many times does Rachel Reeves have to be investigated for credit card spending, CV lies, gifts and gratuities before somebody realised she does not have the morals to be Chancellor, says Mick in Wallington. Yes, a very good point. And Steve says in Ipswich, I wish to complain in the strongest possible terms, showing cackling Camilla just made me regurgitate my bacon roll. Thank you. Sorry about that. Now, we asked earlier whether or not you'd had some problems with the NHS, because we've been told that an awful lot of people are now getting misinformation added into their medical records. And I mentioned the story we'd had the other day from Craig, who said that his wife was awaiting an MRI scan in hospital. She'd been there 4 days, having been admitted to hospital. They didn't say that it was an emergency. In fact, they wouldn't give her the MRI scan because it was an emergency. The problem was on the Saturday, she was meant to go on holiday. And by Tuesday, she was still waiting for the MRI scan. I'm happy to say we've got an update now from Craig as to what's been happening. So, Craig, take it away.
Hi, Mike. Quick update for you on the wife and the MRI scan. Finally, after 6 days, 5 nights stuck in hospital waiting for an MRI scan and being frowned upon by not being allowed to pay for a private scan, because apparently the private scan wouldn't get uploaded to the NHS records for another week. Finally, she had one yesterday at 2 o'clock. Everything's clear. They sent her home. And hopefully we're going to bugger off for a few weeks this weekend. Great staff in the NHS. Can't fault them at all. Looked after my wife fantastically. Whoever's running the department and running the scans and organising and administrating is an absolute moron. Please, take yourself into a dark room, have a word with yourself, sack yourself, put a doctor in charge, for God's sake.
Yeah, Craig, great to hear that everything's fine as well, but also great to hear that after finally 6 days, and they were supposed to go on the holiday, as I say, on the Saturday, so finally on Wednesday she gets the scan and everything's good, so now they can go on holiday. Let's talk to James Price, political commentator, because yet another, what can only be described as an NHS problem seems to have popped up this morning, James, which, again, I didn't know was going to be the focus of our conversation, but I might as well start off with it. Very good morning to you. This is from, we started talking today about a study that's been done in which it says that a quarter of people have found that they've got medical records with wrong information in them. And when I started to delve a little bit deeper into it, it turns out it's quite hard to get hold of your medical records now. If you happen to have an NHS app, you might be able to get your doctor's records. But if you've ever been to any hospital, you have to go to each hospital individually to ask for them.
Yeah, what a mess the whole situation is. I think that there's a broad point here, which is that the model that the NHS doesn't work. And that guy sending in a voice note put it exactly right. When you do get caring doctors and nurses there, they're some of the best in the world.
Yeah.
And I don't think we should fetishize them, because there'll be some who aren't so great. But by and large, these people are amazing people whose careers are spent looking after all of us. That's got nothing to do with how that system is funded. And I think the American system, people will go, oh, well, you just want everybody to die if they can't afford it. The American system is, of course, the only system in the world that's more dysfunctional than the NHS. There are all sorts of other systems in the world that mean that you can get treated when you need to and you don't need to whip your checkbook out, but that are much better funded. And so specifically on this story, if the system were better funded, you'd have better people in there designing systems that actually worked, not the fact that the NHS, I think, is still the #1 user of fax machines and pages in the world. And then you'd be able to get clever joined up systems. And I think that the last thing I'd say on it is that there are some very exciting companies. There's a company called Palantir in the United States who are very keen to help out, and they were very, very effective in the vaccine rollout in this country and identifying where people needed the medicines and things like that. And they want to help get into the NHS systems and help modernize them, which is so desperately needed. But then you have people scared of thinking, oh no, you're just going to sell all of our data off. Well, frankly, I trust fancy AI companies to do better data security than NHS trusts do.
Yes, well, the NHS has many years of history, long history, of not being able to manage its IT at all. Do you remember there was, probably about 20 years ago now, they commissioned something like a £4 billion budgeted new computer system, which never actually got up and running and never worked. And so they threw £4 billion at the wall, effectively, and got nothing for it.
Yeah, extraordinary, isn't it? I do think the technology itself has moved on a lot since then. I think they were probably trying to be too ambitious too soon. And when you see some of the mind-boggling technological advances we've had, I do think the tech is probably there now. The problem, again, is in the implementation of it. You want someone who actually knows how artificial intelligence works, rather than someone who can just about spell AI.
Yes.
Perhaps like some of the Labour members of Cabinet would struggle even to spell.
Yes.
So the technology is there, and I think the exciting revolution that will be coming in healthcare is extraordinary. How many people watching this today have already gone and used something like ChatGPT and said, look, I've got an earache in my left ear, my nose is runny and my toe's fallen off. What have I got? And diagnosed themselves with a ChatGPT rather than going to a regular GP.
Yes, I'm sure there's an awful lot of that going on because so many people can't actually get to see a GP because it's simply impossible. And if you happen to be lucky enough to get an appointment, more than likely they'll have your wrong medical records in front of them. They won't really know you very well because they've only seen you about once in their lives. And they may well give you medicine or not, because sometimes they say, just when you finally get into the door, and they say, well, why don't you see how you are in about a week? And if you come back then and you're still suffering, I might give you some antibiotics, but obviously I don't want to give you any medicine because it might make you immune from it in the future. I mean, that's the other problem, isn't it?
Yeah, it's a good point. And it is actually a big broad society problem. We have, I think, for a few decades now, thrown antibiotics at people, and the kind of antibiotic resistance we're seeing is a big problem that we are storing up for ourselves. And I suppose this is a side effect of when you have a system that is supposed to be theoretically infinite amounts of supply of healthcare. There's no limit that someone can have in a universal system like ours. And so theoretically the demand should have to just spike out forever and ever and ever as well. And that will have an impact, as you say, on antibiotics. It has an impact, as you say, on getting to see a GP. And this stuff is just entirely unsustainable. When you see the increase in general of the NHS budget, it's going to trend at some point in the next few decades, if it's not dealt with, to a kind of 100% or so of spending and not leave anything for anything else at all. We cannot afford to become a healthcare service with a country tacked on at the end. And I think that the mindset that too many have had in thinking that it's this sort of sacred institution, as Nigel Lawson said, the closest thing that Britain has to a national religion anymore, is a very damaging thing for reforming the system itself and for treating the patients who need its care.
Yeah, absolutely. And as more and more people come into the country, more and more pressure gets put on it, of course. We found out today 34,000 is the number now of illegal migrants that have come since July when Labour got in. Let's have a look at Nigel Farage yesterday at Prime Minister's questions. And I want you to pay particular attention to the two gentlemen behind him while he's trying to make a point.
Mr. Speaker, to date so far this year, 10,000 young, undocumented males have illegally crossed the English Channel into our country, a 40% increase on this time last year, many coming from cultures that are somewhat alien to ours. They are being housed at a cost of many billions of pounds a year in hotels and increasingly in private rented homes. The effect on communities is one of a sense of deep unfairness, actually bordering on resentment. Is it not time to admit that Smash the Gangs was nothing more than an election slogan and not a policy? And isn't it time to declare a national emergency and to act accordingly?
Prime Minister. Mr. Speaker, we are passing a borders bill with extensive powers to smash the gangs. These are terrorist-like powers that give powers to the police to intercept where they think the suspects are committing people smuggling, which is a vile trade. We must take back control of our borders after the last government lost control. But what did he and his party do? Did they support those extra measures to actually smash the gangs? No, they went in the lobby with this lot in their new coalition to vote against them.
Forget about Starmer's answer, which is so ridiculous it's not even worth commenting on, I don't think. You know, the idea that you're going to try and identify where the people smuggling activities might be going on. Yeah, check the dinghies, mate. I mean, that's where they all are. But the two guys sitting behind him were being incredibly rude and boisterous and sort of what I would say rather childlike in their kind of treatment of Nigel Farage, as if, you know, he shouldn't have the right to speak about such matters. The one on the left is a guy called Max Wilkinson, who's a Lib Dem MP for Cheltenham. And then the other one is Alistair Douglas Pinkerton, who's another Lib Dem MP for, where is he from? Surrey Heath. And you just think to yourself, you know, are these people so out of touch? Do they not realise that actually the people of this country are sick to death of illegal migration? They're sick to death of the numbers going up and up and up. And what we don't need to see is politicians jeering and having a go at people trying to talk about the issue.
You're absolutely right. I think one of them, the chap with the white hair, looked like he was uttering some distinctly unparliamentary language at one point, rhyming perhaps with that metal object that ships used to throw down.
Yes.
Aimed at poor Nigel, although I'm sure he's been called worse and has got thick enough skin to be able to take it. But you're completely right. I think the bit that really caused their ire was Farage saying something that you and I have talked about on this show many times, that is obviously and undeniably true, that people who are crossing over illegally from another country are obviously from a different culture. And Farage went so far as to say alien culture.
Yes.
I go so far as to say that as well. That is completely uncontroversial. The vast majority of these people, none of them are coming from Europe, none of them are coming from the United States, they're not coming from Japan, they're coming from lots of undeveloped countries, and I can understand that they would want to come here. We've got lots of job opportunities, you get paid better, it's a lovely, peaceful land. I go so far as to say it's still just about the greatest country in the history of the world, but they have ideas, not just about the metaphysics of reality, their religious views or whatever, but about how to treat women, about how gay people should be treated, about how to behave and comport oneself in public, about a sense of belonging to this nation and a willingness to sacrifice for it, and sense of fair play, that are completely antithetical, completely at odds with what it is to be British and to live in this country. Being British is not about your skin colour or anything like that, but it's more than it is just about learning to queue and having a nice cup of tea and watching Paddington and any of this sort of twee nonsense, right? These are very, very, very deep ideas, deep currents, deep flows of culture and character and society that if you have tens of thousands of almost all men of fighting age coming here to try and have an easier life and to exploit this society, that is a problem. And if there's an MP who wants to chunter away about it, well, I'm sure the electorate will have something to say about that.
Yeah, absolutely right. But again, no sign at all of any kind of cessation of the numbers coming. In fact, if anything, there's more people coming than ever because the draw is as big as it's ever been. We saw this weekend that, you know, not only are we now looking at many, many billions of pounds being spent on hotels, but we're going to spend billions more on rental accommodation, which Serco is in the process of sort of scooping up and offering people vast amounts of money to rent to government so that we can pay for more migrants to come and live in a house.
Yeah, I think, Mike, this is such an important point that you've raised here, and I really want people to try and get their heads around what this actually looks like. So everybody who's watching and listening at home pays taxes. Those taxes go into the government, and they're supposed to be spent on potholes and on educating our children and on the NHS we just talked about and on soldiers and important things like that. Instead, that money is not only going on hotels to house these people who are probably never, according to the kind of data that we can get, ever going to make a kind of net economic contribution. They're always going to cost more than they actually make us, so they shouldn't be coming and allowed to stay for economic reasons in the first place. But now your taxes are going to be spent on either companies or councils either renting properties or even probably soon I think we're starting to buy properties. Will price you and your children and your grandchildren out of being able to live in the neighbourhoods that you all grew up in, because the council will go and outbid you with your own money to house illegally entered migrants, stopping you from being able to ever own a home. And at the same time, those people are blocking the building of more houses that we need for British people to be able to have an affordable place to live. It is madness. It is a cancer in the heart of our society. And when the correction comes, and that will be a very unpleasant time, it will be more unpleasant, talking about lots of mass deportations and remigrations of people. It's going to be very unpleasant. I wish it didn't have to happen. It's going to be a lot more unpleasant than it needed to be if mainstream politicians had taken this issue seriously and addressed it before it got as bad as it's now got.
Yes, because I think it is now out of control. It's almost as though there's nothing they can now do. I mean, even Nigel Farage has basically admitted that you can't deport everybody, even if they've come here from another country and they don't actually have the right to be here, because it's an impossibly big number. But let me finish up with the final story for you, which is an exclusive in The Sun today by Stephen Moyes. The centuries-old cry of all rise as judges enter the court has been axed, apparently. I didn't know this, right? Because I don't spend a lot of time in courts these days, I have to say. I used to do it as a journalist, mind you, not as a defendant. All rise if able is now apparently what they say. Have you ever heard anything so ridiculous?
No, I didn't hear this when I did jury service a few years ago, although there is an awful lot of standing up and sitting down, so it could perhaps be slightly streamlined. No, I think that increasing numbers of people will be hearing it because, as you say, crime is getting out of control now. Maybe we'll have to start saying all rise in lots of different languages to be particularly inclusive.
Yes.
Given that we know actually that foreigners commit a hugely disproportionate number of crimes, especially of sexual offences. So we'll hear it in all kinds of exotic languages going forward. I understand that they're trying to do this to be inclusive, but I just think that actually excludes people. Everybody wants to be treated broadly the same. And you'll understand if you're sat in the witness box or something, there's someone in a wheelchair that they can't actually rise. No one's expecting that to happen.
Of course not.
Right? It's just taking it way too far and not focusing on actually putting the criminals away, which is what they should be doing.
That would be better, wouldn't it? Absolutely right. James Price, good to talk to you. Thank you very much indeed. Phil says this, Mike, if the firearms officer cleared of wrongdoing in a court of law with the jury telling the judge it should never have come to court, is now taken to task by the force itself, is this not grounds for discrimination against the Metropolitan Police? Well, I would say so. I think it's absolutely mad for this particular case to go ahead. One here from John in Newport. Morning, Mike. I had a great letter from my local ear, nose and throat hospital recently, which basically said, we do not have any appointments at the moment. We don't know when we can offer you an appointment, but we will let you know when we do. If you no longer need this appointment, let us know and we will take you off the waiting list. Brilliant. Yeah. Well, obviously you still need an appointment that can't be made, don't you? Unbelievable. Mark in Selby. Mike, it takes Tony Blair acting as a focus group of one, telling Miliband what the country has been saying for years about the jeopardy of the net zero policy for things to start happening. Perhaps Tony can also suggest a national inquiry into the rape gangs and that the illegal immigrant numbers are a national emergency too, and that we must leave the ECHR. Can only ex-prime ministers now state the bleeding obvious and be listened to? Well, it's a good point, isn't it? Well, maybe that's how it all starts, though. Maybe that's how you turn around this ridiculous government and make them actually do something proper. We shall see. Let's get a voice note from Andy.
Morning, Mike. Andy in a very sunny Southsea this morning. On the NHS, I finally managed to get myself an appointment after 6 days of trying on the e-consult form. So I managed to get through yesterday. Managed to get myself some antibiotics sent through by the doc. So, yeah, it took 6 days, but I got there in the end. And on the NHS app that the doctor was just talking about, I do have that app, and to be fair, it is very good. So if you can download it, people, do it, 'cause it does make life a bit easier. You can see what medicines you've got or what's upcoming or whatever you've had in the past or whatever. So keep up the great work, Mike.
Andy, thank you very much indeed. It does seem to be a bit of a lottery, though, doesn't it? Depending on which part of the country you're in, depending on which hospital you're attached to, depending on which doctor you've got. Some people are getting better experiences than others, no question about that. We'll come back to this story, I'm sure, very shortly. Coming up, though, we're going to speak to Graham Batsman about cyber attacks, because you know about the Marks and Spencer's one, which pretty much put them out of business for about a week. It's now gone and moved on to the Co-op, who were hit yesterday, and who knows where it's all going to end. We'll find out what's going on in the high street. Coming next.
The defence of murder, it requires you to have malice aforethought, you know, that you've actually planned, thought about what you're doing. As Sergeant Blake had a split second to make a decision. And as you've seen, a car is more deadly sometimes than a gun. And I just think the public will see this once again as the police being under attack when the police get rightly criticised about things, about not failing enough, not solving enough crime, not being on patrol enough. But here we had dedicated officers who were keeping Londoners safe.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Welcome back to Morning Glory. It's 9:26. I'm Mike Graham with you for about another half an hour or so. Julie Hartley-Brewer, of course, will be here. It is May Day. If any of you want to get involved in doing something for May Day, you could pop along to Trafalgar Square this afternoon around about 2:30, where you'll be able to hear speakers from Unite, the union, RMT, of course, the train drivers, the teachers union, and the Palestinians' UK ambassador. I wonder what he's going to have to say about May Day. Who can say? But how about this from Brian? He says, I feel sorry for your mate Jurgen. He's only had his job for a matter of months and will probably be made redundant due to Tony Blair. Poor old Jurgen. Yeah, he'll probably get a nice package, though, to disappear with, won't he? And rather than, Andy says, Mike, rather than adolescence being shown in all schools, maybe grooming from last night's TV should be rolled out. And that's from Andy in Cornwall. Yeah, interesting times, I suppose. Let's talk, though, now about something completely different. Graham Batsman is here, technical cybersecurity consultant and cybersecurity trainer, because there's been some cyber attacks out there in the retail sector that have been particularly damaging to Marks and Spencer's most recently. And yesterday, the Co-op seemed to be hit in a similar way. Let's find out from Graham what it's all about. Graham, very good morning to you.
Yeah, good morning, Mike. Thanks for having me.
Not at all. Thanks for joining us. I mean, does it look to you as though these two events are related, the Co-op and Marks and Spencer's?
Potentially, yes. If you look at history and different sectors, say pharmaceuticals, for example, say AstraZeneca's hit, you often find that there's a sharing agreement between them. So if they're hit or potentially hit, as in wasn't fully breached, they'll often share information to the other ones to stop it and block it. So this could potentially have been something similar.
Okay.
Possibly M&S saw something, shared it, Co-op wasn't hit. Just speculation. There's various rumours out there about what happened, but Co-op and M&S haven't really given a real report yet.
No. And I mean, it seems to have gone after, in the Co-op's case, they were forced to shut down parts of their IT system. But talking to people I know just from who would normally be shopping at Marks and Spencer's, they were saying they couldn't buy anything at Marks and Spencer's, they couldn't buy anything online. It was a real problem for them and presumably cost them a lot of revenue.
Yeah, correct. I met a friend who was, I think, a few days ago now trying to pay and struggled.
Yeah.
I think they've done fairly well, though. It's been going on a week or so. If you look at other organisations, there was a council hit by ransomware years ago in England, and also Maersk Shipping Line was hit some years ago. They were out for kind of months or possibly a year or more. So done a reasonable job, but still an issue potentially behind the scenes.
And without necessarily knowing who's responsible for this, can you sort of find out or figure out what the motive is? Is it just disruption, or is there more to it than that?
So usually when you hit a private firm, you probably want money, unless a political connection. If it's a defence contractor, potentially. M&S is not a government, it's a private entity, so probably most likely cash or to leak the data, or both in many cases.
Right. So what, there would be some kind of ransom demand of some kind?
Yeah, ransomware is somewhat changed. So ransomware was simply there to get X million pound in Bitcoin, possibly with a negotiation happening. In more recent cases, they will often leak or claim to leak the data and say, please pay us some money or we'll leak it. So it could be both as well.
Right. And in terms of the way that companies are kind of built to withstand this type of attack, I mean, how well would you say most companies are defensively against it?
So it quite depends on the sector. If you were going to take a pharmaceutical firm, you will probably find they're better than many government departments. M&S is probably reasonable compared to many.
Yeah.
The issue you have is M&S and others will have tens of defenders, and there are millions potentially of attackers. So you only need to once to get through.
Yeah, it's a bit like terrorism, isn't it? With the famous Martin McGuinness phrase that, you know, we only have to be lucky once, but you have to be lucky all the time. Is it something that we all just have to get used to? I mean, we haven't had a banking problem for a while, but you know, every now and again something does happen to a bank, and everybody goes, "Oh, what's going to happen to my money? Is it safe? You know, are we going to be attacked and suddenly find that we've got nothing?"
Yeah, correct. I'm sure it's going to continue. Banking so far has been reasonable, probably because they have a higher budget and resources.
Yeah.
Retail, for example, there. But I'm sure it's not going to slow down if the money is there.
No. And so, I mean, what do you expect will happen with the M&S story? Will they keep it to themselves? Will they share what maybe happened? Will we get any more clues in terms of what was likely to be the cause of it? Was it Russians? You know, that's always the first question, isn't it?
So there was a report 3 or 4 days ago by a journalist at Bleeping Computer claiming multiple sources told him that it was a group called Scattered Spider, and the software ransomware strain was called Dragon Force. So that's one possible clue. I think M&S have been somewhat transparent, so they may, because of their reputation, come out in the next few weeks and admit something.
Right, OK. Well, we'll keep an eye on it. And so I guess so far today, fingers crossed, there hasn't been part 3, as far as we know.
No. Probably, I think all the others are probably waking up and probably sharing to try and preemptively block what's gone on in the past.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, we'll keep our fingers crossed. I'm afraid it's not much of a defence, but it's something. Graham Batsman, thank you very much indeed. Technical cybersecurity consultant and cybersecurity trainer as well. Talking of training, we've got something quite interesting coming up in a minute. But before we do that, Paul is in Leeds, wants to talk about the NHS. Paul, very good morning to you.
Hello.
How are you doing, sir? What can I do for you?
I'm doing well. I really like your programme. I spend a lot of time watching it.
Thank you.
What happened to me? I'm 59 now.
Right.
I had a stroke on the 2nd of September 2005.
Okay.
I didn't feel well that day, but I didn't feel poorly. And I cut my day short. I went home early and I sat making myself a drink. But when my wife came home from work, she used to be an air stewardess.
Right.
So she said, "Were you drunk?" I said, "No, I'm not." So she said, "Oh, I think you're having a stroke." So the mistake we made, my wife rung 111. What they did, this woman answered the call and said, "Can you make yourself, are you way to hospital?" So I went to the local hospital and introduced myself at the counter as a stroke, I probably had a stroke. They didn't see me for 3/4 of an hour.
Right.
The triage nurse saw me, they gave me a scan, and then I walked out of the room, and then they came and gave me another scan, and this is at tea time. I waited till about 11 o'clock at night. They transferred me to another hospital. I give all my wife my work gear, thinking, flipping it, I can do without this. I've got loads of work to do tomorrow.
Right.
And I can't honestly remember turning up at the hospital at the LGI because I can't remember all the journey.
Right.
And then I woke up in the morning, and cut a long story short, I basically stayed in hospital for 2 months. Basically escaped because they weren't doing anything for me.
Right.
But then I went home. I was poorly for 2 years. My wife retired, and basically I'm still sat in a chair now. I can walk. I've got my driving license back.
Yeah.
They got me electric car, which I'm really grateful for. But I wouldn't have had one if I didn't have had a stroke.
No. So you think you would have been less badly sort of damaged if they treated you quicker? Is that what you're saying?
Well, I sit watching these programmes on the night. You see these old ladies that have a clot, because they had a clot. So it's on the left-hand side of my brain, and they didn't give me anything.
Right.
Nobody's even explained. There's a matter of courtesy.
Yeah.
Nobody's actually explained. The specialists were quick to sign me off, so I don't have to go again.
Right.
But I'm just basically under being looked after now.
Right.
And I was successful. I've never worked for anybody all my life. I had my own business.
Yeah. And just ruined it. Yeah. Well, listen, Paul, I'm pleased that you're enjoying the show. I'm sorry to hear about what happened to you, but this is the trouble. I mean, they always say when you have a stroke, don't they? It has to be, the first kind of hour is very critical as to what happens and how they can fix you and how they can get you back to as normal a life as you could possibly have. Rob says this: you can't always get your GP records because not all GPs are able to connect to the system, and not all hospitals connect with the GPs or the NHS app fully or at all. And Helen says this: GP practices have to sign up to that part of the app. My practice only did that in the past couple of years, while the other practice in the same building did that from the start. Best to keep asking through the practice, patients group and suggestion box. Well, thank you very much indeed for that. Yeah, absolutely right. The NHS app seems to be great for some people, not so great for other people, depending on which part of the country you're in, depending on which doctor you've got, depending on exactly what it is that you're trying to find out. Some people love it, other people just don't get on with it at all. Now, coming up, something a bit unusual for you, because it is May Day. We're going to get a dog in the studio, because the dog is a very clever dog. His name is Ziggy, funnily enough, same name as my dog. But he's not coming in on his own. He's coming in with a former soldier who's here on behalf of the veterans charity Bravehound, who are partners with the Theatre of War production. There he is there. Hello, Ziggy. He looks lovely, doesn't he? He looks excited to be in here. I'm sure he will be. He'll be coming in a minute. This is all about emotional support dogs, basically. Richard Mearns is going to be here to tell us about his PTSD and about how great Ziggy is to help him to get back to where he was in his life. This is Talk.
across the UK. On DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Welcome back to Morning Glory. It's 9:38. Since May Day, of course, if you choose to celebrate the Workers of the World Uniting, entirely up to you. There's a meeting in Trafalgar Square, 2:30 this afternoon. You can go and listen to a load of union bosses speaking, and you might even hear from the Palestinian ambassador as well. We've got something much more fun, though, for you, I'm afraid to say, and that is Richard Mearns is here. Richard, very good morning to you.
Morning.
Welcome to the show and breakfast, and you've got a beautiful little dog there with you called Ziggy. Hello, Ziggy. Ziggy, how you doing? Yeah, he's looking at me. He's your support dog, basically, because you're a former soldier. You're here because of an incredible project, really. The Theatre of War joined up with a group of people called Bravehound. That's the Bravehound, rather, the Veterans Charity. Tell us, first of all, I guess, how you got here, because you were suffering from PTSD. Where were you serving?
So I was a medic in Iraq in 2003.
Yeah.
And I left in end of 2005.
Right.
Went on into a career in policing and so on, and sort of a normal route.
Yes.
And then 2009, I was diagnosed with PTSD.
Right.
And my life sort of went down, went spiralling, didn't know where to go, where to turn, so on. Resulted in a point of suicide and literally taking myself to the precipice of suicide.
Goodness. And so what happened between sort of 2005 and 2009 then? Were you aware of something changing in your world?
I was aware of what I would describe as just normal nightmares and stuff like that. When I actually described them as part of my diagnosis, they were very clearly just flashbacks, and I just naturally attributed it to the fact that you've seen something bad, you've been involved in something heavy, you're expected to dream about it, but obviously it took a turn. And
did it get worse then?
It progressively got worse. And I would say, bizarrely, once I knew about it and I knew where it was, it probably made it a little bit harder, because you then, at that time, and it's improved since, there wasn't a real direction, there wasn't a place to turn to. I felt completely isolated and nearly took my life in 2010.
Yeah, and were you still working as a police officer at that point? Right. And so was it, I mean, what you were seeing in these dreams or nightmares, was it real experiences that you were remembering?
Vivid flashbacks. So as real as you and I sat here now is how they could be. I would wake up and think I was still in a situation, and that is probably one of the most difficult parts of it, because, and they happen less and less now, thankfully, because of Ziggy, but they turn your life on its head. You don't get to sleep, you operate in a constant fight mode, and flight, it doesn't exist.
And you're probably frightened to go to sleep, presumably.
I would regularly sit up until I was so tired that I would fall asleep. And it is difficult, because you end up in that position where you are just drained, and then you have to go and work all day. And then you work all day, and then you get home and you don't want to do any sleep, and you just a constant cycle, and it becomes draining, it becomes debilitating. I've got to a point where I just wouldn't go out. I would be in a position where I didn't want to leave the house. People would say, let's go for a drink.
And did you have anybody with you at the time, living with you?
Yeah, so initially, yes. I had a relationship that fell apart as a result of everything. I pushed everyone away. I isolated myself from family. There was a point where I think for the best part of 2 years I didn't really speak to my family, which, looking back, is a very sort of horrible
dark place to be. And so once you got diagnosed, then what happened then? Did you leave the job? Did you try?
Yeah, so I was diagnosed by combat stress, which was really good, like, without doubt. They, for what they do, really, really, really good, and then progressively went forwards from there, and life started to get worse and worse. I ended up leaving the job and then went into self-employment, basically, and sort of self-unemployment, and sort of skipped forwards to a point where I realised that I was either going to become a statistic or I was going to take this head on. So in 2016 I decided to take it head on.
Okay. And that was when you met Ziggy?
So when I got Ziggy. So I got Ziggy from a charity, and then we basically worked together. I got him at 6 months old. By 9 months old, I was working. in a serious fraud office, and going around investigating crimes, travelling around on a really interesting investigation, which kept me back into a mould, pushed my limits, went into hotels, and this is with an assistance dog learning, and really changed my life. It gave me an opportunity to really have a second chance.
And what does he do for you exactly?
So what he does, and less now, thankfully. So it's progressively getting to the point where I need him less, but he does flashback interruptions. So when I first got him, I was having probably about 5 or 6 flashbacks a week, and that in itself is debilitating. And when I then got him, they progressively declined to 1 or 2, where this year has been a bit difficult. I'm not sure why, but it's been a bit difficult. However, previous years I would have 1 a month. And
when you say interruptions, does he see that you're having something?
Yeah, so what he does, so most of mine are at night, very few are during the day. I have a lot of intrusive thoughts during the day, but most of the flashbacks are at night, and what he does is physically wakes me up. So at the beginning, he woke me up quite simply halfway through them, or during them, and I would be just covered in sweat, going, "Why are you waking me up?" And then it got to the point where he was waking me up before it would even happen. And he was just incredible. Like, I get in trouble for saying this, but he's such a great bit of kit.
And it's amazing, isn't it? Because at the end of the day, dogs know things about you that nobody can really explain, can they?
Yeah, dogs in their own right are they're fantastic. There's so many attributes a dog can have, and when they're your dog and they know you, they know the slightest change, the slightest behavioural change. Dogs in their own right provide great support. For me, I think he's kept me alive. Like, he's kept me employed.
Saved your life, really.
I remember I did a podcast with some friends many years ago now, as it is, looking back at it. Declassified podcast, and he basically described it as an emotional prosthesis. And it is, because he has been my rock. He is whereas other people who have lost limbs and suffer as a result of that, and the mental health side, when someone looks at them, they go, "Oh, hang on a second, I've got that." But when someone looks at me, well, what's the problem? Why is this the case? I generally, I've been told I look normal.
Yeah, you do. but I mean, tell us more about this, the charity as well. Bravehound partners with the Theatre of War.
Yes.
There's a production coming up. This is a kind of I guess there's a sort of showbiz connection to all this.
Yeah, so absolutely. So Bravehound charity, Scottish charity, registered up in Scotland, and their basic main efforts are providing assistance dogs to soldiers, veterans with PTSD, and other elements like anxiety and sort of those areas. And they also provide support to the families and associated parts. At the minute, they've got 27 dogs on a programme, of which 23 are placed, which are small numbers, but these are life-changing figures.
Absolutely.
Because if you thought that those people would just be lost to the world because of that, you end up in that position of thinking, hang on. And there's a lot of issues around funding and the need for funding. And they've collaborated with Theatre of War since, I would say, 2017, maybe a bit earlier, carrying out these plays and reenactments of Greek tragedies. So Philoctetes, and today, which is on this evening, is Ajax. And what they are scriptures not scriptures, but stories from can't even say his name.
It's hard to say, isn't it?
Sophocles. We're not going to pretend I can say that.
Sophocles.
Yeah, we'll go with that.
And Philoctetes.
Yes.
By the looks of it. Yeah.
Yes. So what that does is it brings out an Ajax today. It brings out conversations that happened hundreds and thousands of years ago. I think that they were written in 405 BC. So the fact that the same occurrences, the same stories are happening historically as they are today. The conversations around suicide, the conversations around things that we now know of PTSD, whereas with VE Day coming up, so shell shock and the likes. So all of those things all come together. But what this does, it has a panel of various people. I'm on the chorus. You've got a panel of Damien Lewis, Leslie Sharp and others, and what we're going to be doing is speaking the play, running it through, and then encouraging healthy debate around a difficult subject.
Yeah.
Around how you feel, how people feel isolated, around suicide, and really bringing to the fore those really complex issues that we talk about, and the amount of places that have it as a tick box of we've spoken about this, we've done this, and actually acting on it. And this encourages that conversation, and I've done it twice before. Both of those are online because of the pandemic, but ultimately they engage people in conversations you wouldn't ordinarily engage with. And what Brian Dorries has done with Brave Hound and collaboration together is incredible, and they do it for other areas as well. So theatre,
and people can come and watch it in some way.
Yeah, so tonight I think it's invitation only.
Okay.
But it's on their site, and I'm not sure how you'd go about getting it. A very late email, maybe.
Brave Hound is the name of the...
Brave Hound is the charity.
Yeah.
And ultimately, things that we're looking for them is raising awareness of what they do.
Yeah.
Dogs are lifesavers. Dogs are lifesavers in general, but these assistance dogs enable people to get out. There are people coming tonight who wouldn't ordinarily have left the house or left where they live to come to the smoke and get out and about. And that is what they are. They change people's lives. They save people's lives. And for me, Ziggy has saved my life.
Yeah.
And I'm hopeful to be writing a book at some point about Ziggy and I. It's still on pen and paper at the minute, but because it's quite difficult to write, because you're rehashing what you've gone through.
Right.
So that hopefully we'll do that, and some of that will contribute to people's awareness of the incredible work that assistance dogs do.
Brilliant. Well, great to see you, and great
Thanks
to see
for having
Ziggy.
us.
Thank you for coming in, and good luck with it all. And when you do the book, let us know.
Brilliant, I will do.
We'll have to have you back. Richard Mearns there, and his assistance dog Ziggy. The star of both the star of the show, really. A little bit of breaking news for you, by the way. Counter-terrorism police will investigate online videos of that Northern Irish rap trio Kneecap, which show its members calling for the death of British MPs and shouting "Up Hamas" and "Up Hezbollah." Not before time, I think, in my view. It's coming up to 10 minutes to 10. We'll be back after this.
The defence of murder, it requires you to have malice aforethought, you know, that you've actually planned, thought about what you're doing. As Sergeant Blake had a split second to make a decision. And as you've seen, a car is more deadly sometimes than a gun. And I just think the public will see this once again as the police being under attack when the police get rightly criticised about things, about not failing enough, not solving enough crime, not being on patrol enough. But here we are, dedicated officers who were keeping Londoners safe.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Welcome back to Morning Glory. 9:53 is the time. Talking about that armed police officer, Steve says this: every armed Met officer should hand back their weapons, including the Royal and MP protection officers, in protest at this disgraceful IOPC action being taken against this officer in the Chris Cabot case. And Sam says hopefully that copper who's getting virtue signalling character assassination will be offered an appropriate job as a spokesperson for how policing should be done and what current real feelings are of the ranks. Maybe Talk can offer him some work. Well, that's not a bad thought, Sam. We'll certainly get him in. Bit of breaking news for you, by the way, which we said just before the break. Counter-terrorism police will investigate, they have confirmed, online videos of Northern Irish rap trio Kneecap, which show its members calling for the death of British MPs and shouting, "Up Hamas" and "Up Hezbollah." Have a look at this.
Tories. The only good Tory is a dead Tory.
Yeah, and they said it was taken out of context, of course, didn't they? Well, I'm afraid it's all recorded, so there's not much else you can say. They all think they're very clever, these characters, don't they? Nice balaclava as well, dressing as a terrorist and being edgy. It's not very helpful. Brian says this: Mike, I watched Prime Minister's questions on Wednesday, and what a farce it was. It was more like a courtroom. Starmer blatantly avoiding answering any questions put to him. But what do you expect? He was a public prosecutor and a human rights lawyer. One thing he ain't is a politician. Why doesn't Lindsay Hoyle, the Speaker, do his job and insist that the Prime Minister answers the questions? Is he too preoccupied planning his next jolly? Our Parliament is not fit for purpose. And on the subject of what was raised by Kemi Badenoch, the grooming gangs, Els Bells in Shropshire says it doesn't matter that it's too early to talk about this disgrace. We all need to sit up and take notice. It has to be a national inquiry. Well, you know, funnily enough, we spoke to Maggie Oliver, a former detective constable from Greater Manchester Police, about that Channel 4 documentary called Groomed, A National Scandal, which was on last night on Channel 4. You can watch it on catch-up, and you probably should do so. She actually said she didn't think an inquiry would do any good. So she's not for that. But let's have a listen to what she had to say.
Mike, anybody who watched that programme last night, and I would recommend that you watch it, because we've talked a lot about this subject, and that can tell you far more than a few words from me ever will. But it talks about Operation Green Jacket. It talks about cases in Yorkshire. Today, Scarlett on that programme gives a very clear picture of what's been happening to her up until 2 years ago. So these things, you know, Marlon, who's her father, talks of how he's tried to get the police to act on his daughter's abuse, and it fell on deaf ears. They are examples of the cases that we see in the Maggie Oliver Foundation all the time, and it's not, sadly, Mike, it's not just victims of grooming gangs that are being failed. It's many victims of serious sexual crime, because our system is not fit for purpose. It's on its knees, it's broken. And that's where people's attention needs to go. I'd suggest that, you know, they perhaps just look at my Twitter to get a snapshot, to get a flavour of what's been said, and to see how they can help in helping us to bring change so that we don't get future generations of children like Jade that you're just looking at there.
I know. It's awful. I don't know whether you saw it yesterday, Prime Minister's questions, but I don't know what you made of Keir Starmer's answer to Kemi Badenoch, who said, you know, why are we not hearing anything about these local inquiries? The Labour government saying they're not going to do a national inquiry because we've already had one. He doesn't seem to be interested at all in pushing this agenda.
You know, I think that there is room in this this scandal, this national scandal, for many people to go down different pathways. For me, I don't need an inquiry to tell me that the system is broken. I want those at the top to be held criminally accountable for gross neglect of duty. But all I see, another inquiry for me would be kicking the ball down the road. But I realise that victims want to be heard, want to have a voice. But what I would say, Mike, it's, you know, the Conservatives, the Labour, Labour, they're all equally negligent. You know, the Conservatives have been in...
Maggie Oliver there speaking to me a little bit earlier on today. Quite a powerful documentary that last night. If you didn't see it, you'll be able to watch it again. Julie Hartley-Brewis here. Very good morning.
We just love Maggie. And again, I contribute to her crowdfunder. Trying to actually get prosecutions, the actual business. The only point of the inquiry is so we can actually prosecute people.
And
not
she's
just people who carried out the grooming, but covered it up for years.
Absolutely right. And are still doing it.
Yep.
Unbelievably so.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Well.
Happy cheery chat on a lovely
happy
sunny
May Day.
Thursday.
You know, there's a do going over at Trafalgar Square. I thought you might like to go after your show. You can listen to some.
What's it celebrating?
Well, some trade unions are going to be there.
Oh, lovely.
And the ambassador from Palestine.
Excellent. I mean, that sounds like right up my strata, I have to say.
Yeah.
I'll pop along.
Yeah, it'd be great,
I'm sure I'll be welcome.
I'm sure you would be.
I mean,
sure they'd love to see you. Anyway.
Anyway, on that note...
The government seems to be at war with itself here over net zero, doesn't it?
Yeah, exactly. I mean, especially, you know, the unions. But again, the unions have been wise to this for ages, haven't they, about, you know, the job losses.
Right.
Tony Blair, unions, everyone seems to be waking up to it. Big question marks about Ed Miliband's job. I've been saying this for ages. He's not going to last year. But everyone stop blaming Ed Miliband. It's Keir Starmer's manifesto. It's his policy.
Yeah.
And it's the policy the Tories supported as well.
It is.
I know we're on local election day. We can't do anything local election, but we're still allowed. A lot of people think you can't talk about politics. You can still talk about politics. It's
We've
a
done
country.
it for 4 hours.
Yeah, exactly.
You know.
I'm going to talk about that US-Ukraine mineral deal.
Yes.
We've got Philip Ingram in the studio who knows his potatoes.
minerals.
And exactly. And so he's going to talk to us about that.